Good afternoon, everyone. It's Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 1 p.m. Sergeant at Arms, has the lobby been cleared? Yes. Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. There are 13 items on the agenda today. Arts Seal, Office of Safe Schools Second Quarter Inspection Report, Construction Change Order, November 24, Construction Projects Bi-Monthly Update, January 25, 25-26 Code of Conduct for Students Pre-Briefing, 25-26 Code of Conduct for Adult Students Pre-Briefing, Policy Review Briefing and First Reading, Mental Health, Proposed Adjustment to School Start Times for the 25-26 school year, Legislative Priorities, Institutional Board Member Seats, Public Comment, and Good of the Order. Per board protocol, each member should strive for 4 minutes with initial comment and 2 minutes for follow-up. Due to the amount of items on today's agenda, I'm going to try to stick really close to that, please. But to start us off, we're going to begin with the Art Seal. Dr. Jason Tomaszewski will be presenting.
Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm here today to present the Florida Fine Arts Seal of Programs. This has been an advocacy effort from the Florida Music Education Association and the Florida Arts Educators Association effort for at least the last decade. I served on those boards when I was a teacher in 2018, and the rumblings of this seal had started then. And it finally became a Florida bill this summer. It was passed in July, and it is an opportunity to showcase the talents of our students, our high school students. The Florida Seal was established to recognize high school graduates who have met the proper exemplary benchmarks in fine arts education throughout the state. And the purpose of the seal was to encourage students to develop those skills in both performing and visual art. If you're really into learning a little bit more about the seal, I included a link in the top of this slide. If not, I'm going to do my best today to explain what the seal is, how do you earn it, and what are we doing now to help students achieve this seal later. There are 3 major criteria for the seal. 1, earn a standard high school diploma. Number 2 is they need to receive an A or higher for 3 years in a fine arts discipline. So that could be band, choir, orchestra, dance, drama, and visual art. We consider those the 6 fine arts discipline. And then there's 3 they need to meet 2 sub-requirements outlined by the Department of Education. Again, they only have to meet 2 of these sub-requirements. Though there's a long list of things that they could do to earn these sub-requirements, they only need to complete 2 of these. I'm going to briefly cover them now, and then I'll go back and in later slides explain what we do as a district to help students meet each of these sub-requirements already. First, they can complete an IB, AP, dual enrollment, or honors course with a B or higher within their arts discipline that they choose. Again, that's band, choir, orchestra, dance, drama, and visual art. They participate in a district or statewide juried event for 2 or more years. They can record 25 volunteer hours in an arts-related community service event. They can submit a portfolio that demonstrates the student is an exemplary practitioner of the arts. And finally, they receive district, state, or national recognition for the creation and submission of original artwork. Now, instead of passing this PowerPoint around to every teachers and students, we created a 1-pager to give out to teachers and students and parents. It helps outline what it is, what they could achieve, how can they achieve it, and also has my contact info. I answer questions from parents and students about this all the time, and helping and giving them the information that they need to know how to apply and achieve this outline. This is included in your attachments page as well, so if you want to read this further, this resource is available. All right, so we're going to dig into each of the sub-requirements and kind of what we do in county already. The first sub-requirement deals with the advanced courses, IB, AP, dual enrollment, and honors courses. They need at least a B or higher just once. These are an example of some of the courses that we offer, including art history, AP art history, AP drawing, AP music theory, Any of the honors courses like jazz band 5 and 6, or ceramics 4, or dance techniques 3 and 4, just to name a few, and any of the IB visual art and music courses count towards this. There is a big note, and I had to confirm with the Department of Education. ACE and Cambridge courses do not qualify for this. When I asked for a reason, they said it wasn't in the original bill verbiage, so they did not want to include it in the requirements. However, there's an opportunity for Cambridge art students later on in one of the other sub-requirements that I'll get to later. I also have an attachment here that'll outline literally every of the hundreds of courses that students can take to help meet this sub-requirement. Sub-requirement 2, a juried event. The state considers a juried event anything where the students get a rating and a score from an arts professional in our field. So we already, as a district, promote, run, offer, and sponsor so many juried events for our students to take part of. If you're a dance student in the county, we have the Florida Dance Performance Assessment, our All-County Dance Showcase, as well in the music world. We have our all-state auditions, you have district solo and ensemble festivals, the music performance assessments, MPAs to some, which is a huge deal, as well as all-county. If you're a drama student, we have the Southwest Florida Theatrical Society One Act Festival, as well as the Individual Event Festival, as well as High School Musical Theater Awards and Broadway Stars of the Future. Our visual arts students have the opportunity to be part of various art shows like Future of the Arts, the Florida State Art Assessment, the state's Scholastic Art and Writing, as well as Art Fest Fort Myers, Art Under 20, and Chalk Block. All of these are events that we already do. It does not mean we can't add more events as we find that they exist or go along or decide that we want to add another juried event to give a specific arts discipline another opportunity, but just these are the plethora of events that we already offer as a district. Sub-requirement 3, record at least 25 volunteer hours in arts-related community service. I worked with Lori Brooks already about this to see if we could double dip with our Bright Futures 100 hours, and yes, the state gave us permission for that. My person from the state also came back to just make sure the 25 hours for this are arts-related. We have great partnerships that we cultivated over the last couple of years with groups like Art Fest Fort Myers, Alliance for the Arts, and Sidney Byrne Davis Arts Center, just to name a few. All of those organizations are constantly looking for ushers, ticket takers, people to help set up and tear down from their events, and all of those hours could count towards the seal. Another cool opportunity that this presents for this specific sub-requirement is having our high school students go back to elementary and middle schools and give private lessons and help out the teachers there to help grow the arts in our younger grade level. So this sub-requirement has plenty of opportunities for the students to meet as well. The fourth one gets a little tricky. It is students submit a portfolio that demonstrates that they are an exemplary practitioner of the arts. The state clarified for us that the portfolio would be submitted to me, the Fine Arts Department of our county. I would assemble a group of 3 to 5 members, mostly teachers from our arts certified teachers from middle and elementary school, to help us grade these portfolios. The state provided us with a rubric that students can use when preparing their portfolios. We are lucky, and this is what I mentioned earlier, that the rubric mimics the Cambridge art rubric. So if you are a Cambridge student and one of the end results of the Cambridge arts programs is submitting a portfolio to the state, it's a good precursor to that Cambridge thing. So students who are preparing a Cambridge art portfolio can submit it earlier to us, get the seal credit while also prepping for their Cambridge final. We do not have a due date at this time for this, but I should have that in the next couple of weeks. And lastly, the last sub-requirement is submitting a piece of original artwork. The state defined that as something that is not a copy of a copy. So if I'm a band student competing in solo and ensemble and I'm doing a Bach piece, that doesn't count as original. I'm just doing something that Bach has already done. However, if I wrote my own piece for solo and ensemble and I got a rating for it, that would count as an original piece of artwork. Mm-hmm. Even Designs and Dreams, if you travel our halls, we have over 600 pieces of artwork. Some are copies of Starry Night, world famous art piece, and some are original pieces of artwork. So the students that submitted original could qualify for the sub-requirement because it's something that they created themselves. And here's a list of some of the other events that we provide that opportunity for students to create their own artwork. The state provided us with plenty of forms and tracking devices for students to use moving forward. Once the students have submitted all of their work with the help of their teachers, we are working with Focus. The state organization is Focus, has submitted their final patch earlier this week. And we'll be able to track everything that the students submit for this seal in focus moving forward. We are looking at the documentation window due late March, early April for the sake of ordering seals in time for the processing and then ordering seals in time for graduation in May. The teachers, APCs, and admin have been trained all this stuff throughout the year as we got little bits and pieces more from the Department of Education. Though the law was passed in July, the state DOE didn't give us rubrics and stuff like that until October. So we're moving along as we get the information from the state. Communication has been forwarded as well as we go along. And then finally, this is what the seal looks like. The state provided the seal. It was created by the Department of Education and will be affixed to their diplomas if they meet the requirements. So, questions, comments, or concerns?
Superintendent or board, any comments?
Yeah, just want to, first of all, thank Dr. Tomaszewski for leading this up. Huge fan of the arts, as you are as well. The arts complete our education of our students. It helps them in so many ways. We could start to talk about the research around math and science and all of that, but just even more than that, helping to make them well-rounded, great people. So just thank you so much for bringing this forward, and I'm excited about the state of Florida offering this.
Any other board comments? Ms. Giovanelli?
Can we have this PowerPoint? I didn't,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you get
because then I could click on the
Yeah.
things that you were mentioning.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think this is great recognition. However, besides getting the seal on their diploma, what other advantages does this help them, like get into art schools or?
Actually, that is a huge part of that as well. So I mentioned earlier the advocacy efforts of the Florida Music Educators and FAEA, the Florida Thespians, the big arts organizations all have collegiate components on this as well. And one of the things when they were working with lawmakers on drafting this was what are the collegiate level looking for in their art students? Like how, types of activities and that sort of thing. So this seal, even though it's not due until after a lot of them already know they're going to college, going through the process will then also help them put stuff on their resume that I had 25 volunteer hours in the arts. I took an IB level music and art program. I was in part of these juried events such as Soul and Ensemble and all state auditions. Those are all huge things that colleges are looking for. The seal itself, since it doesn't come till they graduate, they already know where they're going to college for the most part, but like I said before, the process, all those sub-requirements are things that I know colleges are looking for as well in terms of their art students, and their well-rounded students as well, like in other academic areas.
So I have one more question. Yeah, sorry. I have one more question. I know that the arts budget was kind of cut last year. Did it affect the school district at all? I know it affected lots of things that are going on downtown, and the Arts Fest and all that. They're very concerned over that. So do you know that?
Luckily for us, it did not hurt our internal Lee County budget. Knock on every piece of wood in the state of Florida, that does not change. It did impact our community partners. As I mentioned earlier, we've cultivated a lot of great community relationships with Sydney Byrne, the Alliance, Florida Rep, all of those groups who were giving us great opportunities for our students moving forward. They had to cut some of that stuff back because of their budget cuts as well, because their operation funds, like I know one of our local arts organizations lost 50 grand of their operating funds, and some of that was used for educational outreach for our organization. So we are still getting great relationships and support from those arts organizations. It's just not as much as it used to be with that arts funding at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Persons?
This just for clarification, because there are people old like me out there. One of the requirements there was to make an A or higher. When we came up, the highest you could make was an A. So maybe
I believe with
explain
the weighted grading system, and I pulled that information from the state verbiage as well. But I believe with certain weighted courses is what they were referring to.
Thank you.
No problem.
I just have a really quick question. The volunteer hours that are required, can those students also use those for Bright Futures? Can they
Yes,
double dip?
yes, that's what we were talking about with Lori, and I confirmed that they can double dip. They can't be paid on our end. I know with Bright Futures, there's other requirements and stuff like that. On our end, it was, had to be arts related, was the big one that I heard from my contact was, it has to be arts related.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Next is Office of Safe Schools, second quarter inspection report. Dave Newland will be presenting to the board.
Good afternoon, board members. Dave Newland, Chief of Safety, Security, and Fleet Operations. Good afternoon to the Superintendent, Dr. Denise Carlin, and our School Board Attorney, Kathy Dupree Bruno. This is our second quarter inspection report from Office of Safe Schools. Again, this is required by the statute, part of the House Bill 1473. It became this year. The compliance inspection for the state will, they stop by the schools and inspect for certain things, such as make sure exterior doors and interior doors are closed properly. There are certain all the compliance issues, things with threat assessment management teams, minutes, and so forth. So this quarter, we had over 27 schools inspected. The second quarter, which is a lot more than the first quarter, which was 6. Out of the 27 schools, and we discussed this in the 101, there's only 7 schools had something minor for the inspection. For clarification, too, these are very minor, so how it works with the state is once I get the notification that the school was inspected, I have a day to acknowledge that they were inspected, and within 3 days, if they find something, these are fixed right away. So before 3 days even took place, all 7 schools were fixed. These were all minor things, could be didn't have minutes for a meeting or something like that really available, but it was right away, it was fixed and put into the system. And I got to say, the schools have done a great job with meeting compliance of all the state requirements, of being ready when the compliance inspectors come to the schools. They are ready to go. They give them all the materials that are needed. So they've done a great job on maintaining all those qualifications and inspections. And again, not knowing when they come to the school. These are all surprise inspections. They don't tell me. They don't tell the schools when they stop by. They just do. So they are very prepared. So I want to give them a lot of credit for the hard work. And I'll stand by for any questions.
Superintendent?
Just to echo what Mr. Newland said, very proud of our schools for the great job that they do with student safety, and just want to commend Mr. Newland for his leadership in that area. I have recently been in Tallahassee and Tampa for new superintendent training, and his name is getting mentioned in very high levels in very positive ways. So just thank you for the support you provide our schools.
Thank you.
Board members, any comments or questions? Mr. Ribble?
I just want to make a comment. I enjoyed my time with you, Mr. Newland. We had our one-on-one, and I thought you did a great job, and obviously you know what you're talking about, and you know what your mission is, and you have a great plan you're putting forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Persons?
When this was originally brought up at the legislative, when they were going to do these surprise visits or whatever, they at one time were saying they were going to do surprise drills or things at the same time. Is that not included at all in these anymore, or are they able to do that? Like come in and say, I want to see your fire drill or you know?
They can come in and request copy. Obviously, as part of it is a request proof they've done all the emergency drills and fire drills as required. And emergency drills are done by a very timely, sensitive, no more than 45 days apart. So they have to be very specific when they do these. But they do check for those. Now, actually have them activate one? No. They do check to make sure they are maintaining the drill requirements for both fire and emergency drills.
Okay, that's good. I mean, they were worried at the SBA, that they were going to be doing that, so, and I see they aren't, so that's good. Just have to, I mean, we're doing all the drills, so that's
Yeah,
perfect.
and part of the concern too is, depending on how you do the drill too, if you notify the local PSAP dispatch, they make sure they're notified way ahead of time that this is a drill, so that's part of the concern too, is to be careful when we do that, that being from a practice drill to something that's actually legit. Thank you.
How, thank you for this. How long were they given to cure the defects?
So how the statute works is two things. One, we have to acknowledge it within 1 day, and they're given up to 3 days to fix the defect. But I will say with these, they're done within 1 day. So they've definitely way within the time frame, they're fixed.
When you told me that, I thought that was really interesting. It was just a short little window, and so I
Yes.
think that's important for people to know that they cured those deficiencies right away. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our construction change order report for November 2024 and our construction projects bi-monthly update, January 2025. Our presenter will be Scott Rickenbacker and Melissa Rivera this afternoon.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Carlin, Esquire DePay Bruno. This is a twofold report. First, we'll start with the change order report for November of 2024 as required by statute. As you will see on the front page, we had a direct material purchase of the district for $7,873. Non-direct material purchases, change orders coming back to the district. We returned back to the district on project savings, $1,027,332.21. Contingency adjustments, we expended $99,386.71. If you go to the second backup page, you'll see that we had 1 DMP, 6 pure change orders, 2 contingency adjustments. And I'd like to just make note of the 4 pure change orders that returned that $1 million, and that come from 4 projects where funds were not expended or returned, and from value engineering savings. Are there any questions on the November report?
Thank you for this. And my question is, Franklin Park, we're done with Franklin Park, correct?
Franklin Park right now is in the closeout state, and then we'll enter into the auditing state shortly.
Perfect, thank you.
So now we'll move on to the bi-monthly construction update. I'm not going to read every chart. You should have gotten them, but what I will do is I will update you on any critical information on each school site so that you're current and up to date with what our knowledge is of the site. We'll start with Bayshore K8 expansion. The next step that we have coming up right now is a 60% design estimate due January 16th. So for my next reporting to you folks, I'll be able to tell you where the dollars are heading for that school and what that budget will look like. Next slide. Are there any questions on Bayshore? Okay, next slide, please. Bonita Springs Elementary rebuild. Right now, that is in a discussion with the community and school board staff. I believe they're actually having a meeting as we speak right now with Adam Malloy leading the band on those discussions as to how we proceed with the historic building and the campus. We just received what you'll notice from your previous reporting. We had an architect's estimate in the amount of $27 million. We just received the 60% construction manager's estimate, and we're at about $34.2 million for the proposed rebuild of the historic building. That will come down. We're still well within our budget of what the board has approved ultimately for a capital plan budget. We see those numbers come down substantially as we get closer to 100% drawings. There's a lot of pad in here that are provided both by the CM and the architect. They call them design contingency. So we should see that coming back as we move forward in time. Any questions?
Thank you. Regarding Bonita Springs, buildings 17 and 18, are we looking at, because it says renovations, interior renovations, site improvements, but buildings 17 and 18, and I know I spoke with the superintendent regarding this when I was out visiting, the bathrooms, they're like, you have to straddle the toilet to even get the door closed, the smell in that, in those buildings. Are we also, and I know someone had been out there, are we also looking at that when we're doing the scope of the renovation?
No, ma'am. Two separate scopes. We can get an answer for you at a later date and share it with the superintendent and the board. If we go into the existing buildings and we start to repair many things that I would, for lack of a better term, call grandfathered in, we open up the potential of having to renovate the entire campus to current codes. So that's not to say that maintenance doesn't have some of those things on their radar for this year's budget to go out there and renovate the bathrooms, and they have an IAQ department that obviously will handle anything that doesn't smell appropriate. But it would not be part of the rebuild for the historic building. But again, not to say it's not being accomplished by operations in the maintenance division moving forward, but we'll definitely mention those concerns, and I'll report some type of answer back to you on that status of those items.
Thank you. I just, because of the fact that it said rebuild, remodel, that's why I asked that question, so thank you.
Okay.
I'll wait for that answer.
Any more questions on that? No? Next slide, please. Cape Coral Technical College expansion. Just prior to the break, on December 9th, we were due to have a 90% estimate, which gets in, typically speaking, about 5% within the dollar value of what we project. The architect's projected value for that school was $19.1 million, and the CM's projected value was $20.5 million. So we're right where we need to be, where I create a total project cost estimate. Usually I bring that forward to you with the phase one. We're right where we need to be within the board-approved budget of $25 million. And again, as we get closer to the 100% drawings and it's getting ready to go out on the street for bid, we see all of those design contingencies start to shrink even further, and then it's the market bearing what the true costs will be. So we're tracking. We've done a lot of VE to maintain and stay within the board-approved budget. So are there any questions on that?
Go ahead.
Next slide. Cypress Lake Middle School. Don't know how many of you drive past that, but we had a successful opening of portables over the Christmas break. I want to give a shout out to Matt Burbach, who's a project manager, and Tina Silcox, who headlined that and got that over the whole Christmas break, spending many of their own days out there relentlessly. We have a CO. The only change to this slide that I would like to make note of is originally we had a July of 2025 substantial completion.
Total project cost.
Oh, total project costs to the board, that will now be March of 2025 coming to you. So that's the only change we made to that slide that you wouldn't see. And we release your information slides a week prior to your board meeting, and these are just one of our updates with our one-on-ones with our staff members. Any questions on Cypress? Next, Hector Caffaretta K-8 rebuild. Just some notes that you won't see on your slides, but you'll see it being put on for the next ones. We did submit the Army Corps of Engineers permitting for that site on November 14th of 2024. What I've asked staff to do is on all the schools that have Army Corps, provide those dates where we could submit it. So when you're looking at these charts, you can say, well, wow, it's been about 8 months. Have we heard anything? And right now we have our legislative staff that the board and Dr. Carlin have brought on board. They're working with the legislative people to try and keep us forefront with that whole process. So hopefully we're at the top of the heap and we can start seeing some permits getting released, and we've got our fingers crossed. There is one issue that cropped up we need to prepare, and I know that Adam Malloy in the planning department and operations, we have to do an ILA with the city of Cape Coral. The ILA that had previously been in place had expired in 2016. Obviously, this is one of the first schools we have built out in the Cape. So they're working, and they'll be with the legal staff creating an ILA agreement to move that forward with the city of Cape. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rickenbacker. My question every 2 months, I know we're waiting on the Army Corps, but how are we looking for shovel in the ground in April? Sorry.
Well, you know, we're avoiding wetlands. Many of our projects, we're totally avoiding the wetlands. We're asking for what is called a no permit required. So it's very limited We're hoping that they can come out and do site visits and expedite that permitting. I'm hoping on January 20th, I think I've said it before, that maybe we can go back to something similar to the 404, and it'll start pushing this thing forward a lot quickly. I don't hold a crystal ball. I can't put a shovel in that ground. I mean, we can, but it's at what risk would the board want to engage in on that?
Thank you. Just wanted an update. I know a lot of the community members asked me about it. Thank you.
Next slide, innovation, preschool 8. Slide has not changed. We're still in the 60% design estimate, and it's going to be due to the board May 13th of 2025. That's when we'll be presenting to you for that school the 60% estimate. We had to give them a little bit more time, which we reported previously, only because staff has changed, direction on that campus has changed, and we had to value engineer and reconfigure some of the program for that school.
I know we've spoke about this school multiple times, and I thought the last time, I was trying to find my notes, that we said we were going to take away that name because it's really not going to be an innovation school any longer. And I think it was Ms. Giovanelli that brought that up the last time. So are we still going with it as the innovation school? Dr. Carlin?
Thank you for the question. That may have predated me, so I'm going to go out on a limb here. And say that I would like an opportunity to speak with staff to get clarification on that, but we will get that update to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, next slide, please. Elementary school L, as you can see, we are due a 90% estimate, February 19th of 2025, so that'll tell us exactly within 5%, as I mentioned before, of where the value of that is coming in regards to our projection of what costs we felt would be at the time where we needed to put together a bid package. And as you're aware, that's a combo site. That's on the corner of Daniels and 82, I believe. And the two schools are going to kick off together. So we're still working. OO is done, but we're still working to finish this up, and they'll both sit. They'll be the reason you'll see a delay potentially is the Army Corps, because until we get that permitting, we can't really go out for bid. There's too much exposure there. So the designs will be done. The estimates will be provided to you folks where we are at that moment in time. And then once that Army Corps is released, then obviously we'll be going out for a bid session and bringing the dollars to you as a GMP amendment. Any questions? Next slide. Elementary school M. As you can see right now, the project for risk mitigation, Army Corps was submitted on December 15th, 2024 for our permitting on that side. To put the entire Army Corps package together, the actual full submission it'll be delayed until January this month when we go in. We had some mitigation issues out there and additional research we had to do. The 30% design estimates were received just before Christmas break, so we got the drawings on the 15th. However, they've requested a couple of weeks to get the estimate from the architect to us. So by the end of this week, the beginning of next week, we're hopefully going to have a 30% estimate from the architectural side of the project team to let you know where that project is heading in terms of dollars and how it relates to the capital approval plan. Any questions? Next slide, high school NNN. I do want to report we had one typo that we picked up. So in the presentation, you'll see that it said 90% on the presentation up on the screen. On the documents you received last week, it said 60. So we've corrected that for this meeting. We have received the CM's 90% estimate, and it's $161.5 million, which is still within the $162.2 million in the board's approved capital plan. And again, that does not include the FF&E component and other items within this. It's purely construction. So what we'll see here as we get closer to 100% and we go out to bid, we may have to do some VE to remain within that budget or ask the board for more if it's deemed appropriate to provide it. But that's part of the process when we get to that point. we VE and we get what we need, and we don't take some of the extras in some cases to get back within the budget. We're right on the border there. Any questions? And again, that was filed in June 8th of 2024 with the Army Corps. So they've done site visits, they're communicating, the legal side has been communicating, with our legislation side has been communicating with those folks. So we're putting the bug in there, and we're trying to get them moving. Next school, middle school 00 in the East Zone. Again, I just mentioned to you how that is symbiotic with L. Those two, we look to bring a total project cost to the board, and that's inclusive of the Army Corps timeframe from when we started. Hopefully August, at the latest, August of 2026. We're hoping to improve on that. If we can, we certainly will, because we need seats and we need to get things in the ground going. But right now, if we were to allow a full 24-month Army Corps review period, that would be the time where I'd be bringing a total project cost into you guys for both schools. Any questions? I see you're all seeing a very similar pattern here, Army Corps, Army Corps, Army Corps.
I have a question.
Okay.
What's your best estimate on the Army Corps delay as far as raising the cost per year? Is it like 5% a year in construction costs, or 10%?
Well,
I mean, 2 years just.
5% went out the window about 4 years ago. It's stabilized somewhat, but you're still seeing area of about 10% inflation factor every year.
So a 2-year delay would be a 20% increase on 100 million.
Well,
School could be 120 million. I mean, I just want the public to sort of be aware of that.
Well, when we were forecasting, it's temporarily been pulled off the capital plan, but I believe it was high school 000 out in the Cape. I believe it was to be delivered around 2030. We are over $200 million for that high school.
Okay, thank you.
That's with an inflation factor that we projected forward. High school 00, so I just spoke to that. Next, Riverdale High School, the remodel. Everything's the same. We're on target. They're utilizing all the various areas as we march through. Great team effort there. Rob Steffenberger working with the principal cook out there. I think everybody's pretty pleased with how things are moving out there. I do want to bring to light, you'll notice that there's a $358,723 expenditure. I mentioned that to you before about all the underground plumbing that had rotted. Just keeping you at the front cutting edge. We are using the project contingency, and we believe we're okay. We believe that's what the contingency is for. We believe we're absorbing that through the project contingency. We don't believe we have to come back, but I just want to make you aware of these unforeseen conditions that come up in these older campuses, and they're just for some plumbing that was not known, $358,000. So we're getting it right, we're getting it fixed, and we're staying within budget up to this point, and we believe we will stay in budget. VPAA renovation at Teal, they're moving forward. We're out there doing the roofs, the windows. You've probably seen the videos of the black box theater. Again, that's still on schedule. No changes in there. And we just started, I believe we did a work authorization where we're going out. The same product we used on the LEPEC building here to seal up the moisture, we're using on the Lemuel Teal building as well to seal any moisture. That's an old brick building, and there's been some moisture infiltration, so it'll be a similar product, different paint schemes, but similar product utilized to stop that as well. And last but not least is just a monthly construction update that my team utilizes to report to my supervisors and to the operations division. Shows all of our projects.
This was the December report.
And that's for December. We just issued a new one this morning that'll go to my upper management first, and then that'll be presented to you for next month as well. Approximately 50 projects. Any questions?
Ms. Jordan?
Just the ones that I had noticed, that the ones that are behind schedule, we're doing everything to get them to where they need to be, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah,
And-
there were
and-
not a lot, but there were some.
And most of the ones that are behind schedule are the traffic improvement projects. We have a vendor where he was late in providing the drawings for that. It's a new vendor that's from the East Coast, civil engineering firm. So we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting with them on Friday. It may be the point where I have to recontract with another vendor, but I want to give them the opportunity to present. They're supposed to have everything this Friday to us. We just had this conversation in our shop before we came over.
Board members, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you for such a diligent workshop. I appreciate it, both of you. Thank you.
Very welcome.
We're going to move on now to the 2025-2026 Code of Conduct pre-briefing and the 2025-2026 Code of Conduct for adult students pre-briefing. The presenters are Dr. Jessica Duncan and Chuck Bradley.
Good afternoon, board members, Attorney Dupuy-Bruno, and Superintendent Carlin. We appreciate the opportunity to come to you today to review our current code of conduct and some of our proposed revisions for next year. So today we'll be going through a review of what we have put in place for this year and some of the changes we enacted. We'll also talk about some of the feedback groups and how we got input on this year's code, and then we'll review the proposals.
So just a quick review of our 2024-2025 code updates that were applied to the current existing code. We added the unauthorized area related to restroom use to bring our code into compliance with Florida Statute 553.865, known as the Safety in Public Spaces Act. We updated the student personal electronic telecommunication device information, which indicated that students are not permitted to use cell phones during the school day unless authorized by a teacher or administrator. We're now living in the world of artificial intelligence, and so we added a statement that explicitly requires that the use of AI and presenting that as one's own work is cheating. And then we added a local code, which we have labeled physical harm, which captures everything that's between horseplay and simple battery, typically horseplay that gets out of hand but does not rise to the level of simple battery. We also expanded the definition of pure conflict, and which provided more options for administrators when pure conflicts were pre-planned, took place in secluded places like bathrooms or other secluded areas. We added Spanish and Creole translations, and we utilized the additional language option of our webpage to provide our code in 100 plus languages. We updated the definition of the infraction of insubordination and disrespect, and basically that this includes additional pieces that help define what insubordination and disrespect is. And then we updated the profanity plank and included a SARC option, a Success Academy Review Committee option, especially for racial slurs. We replaced our plans in each level with levels and level options. This was a technical change. And this also brought our code into compliance with the Florida assessor tiering. We were backwards at one point with our level 1 being the lowest and our level 5 being the highest, and the state is the opposite. So we brought our code into compliance with that. We included tier consequences for drug, tobacco, and alcohol use. In particular, we wove in interventions to be used, especially for first-time use and second-time use in the current code. And then we clarify the definition of and consequences for fighting. And again, this is to help understand the difference between fighting and peer conflict. And we also went further in defining a level 2 fighting offense when pursuing, joining, or pre-planning were evident in that piece. And then we updated our off-campus felony definition to align with current law enforcement definitions.
So we made a lot of changes last year that we were able to implement. Many of those ideas came from our feedback groups. Those feedback groups are really important to us. If you're familiar with the code, you know that we have, over the last several years, made significant changes. It used to be 2 separate codes, elementary and secondary. Each were about 80 pages in length, so it was very difficult for parents to read. It was not very family-friendly, so we made, again, significant changes and then substantial changes to the code to support our schools. So going along with that, we had our feedback groups for next year's code, and you can see the groups listed, administrators. We did invite at least a teacher from every school to a teacher focus group. We met with our student groups. We had student advisory, a group of students at Success Academy. We also had a behavior and discipline task force, and that was made up of a variety of individuals, law enforcement, we had parents, we had a parent advocate, we had school security, some school staff. So it was a very varied group. We met with that group 3 times, and we have 2 more meetings planned with that group in January. We have, over the last several years, had community conversations. We continued that this year at 4 sites. We had a meeting offered in each area. And in that, we do a large group presentation. So we talked about vaping, and then we had breakout groups on the code of conduct, MTSS and ESE, mental health, and health services. We met with superintendent's cabinet. We also did a significant survey collection this year. We did that with anybody from our community conversations. We also had some of our regional support staff go out to a school when they were doing a food drive, and they were able to collect several hundred survey responses at that site. We have 2 more potential opportunities. Talc and Spalk have been involved in our behavior discipline task force, but we've reached out to them to see if they have additional input. And then we will also be meeting with our district advisory council at the end of January. So again, the behavior task force, the goal of this was to really look at student behavior and what the impact on that was on learning and staff retention. This outlines the members, which I already shared. We also had some higher education personnel, Talc, Spalk, assistant principals. And that group was divided into 4 subgroups, and they talked about data, Tier 2, which are those classroom behaviors, Tier 3, which are the more significant behaviors, and then professional development. And then in addition to the teacher task force, we had a separate administrator task force. So we did a lot of outreach and really got feedback this year from our important stakeholders.
So we have some proposed updates that came out of this feedback for the 2025-2026 Code of Conduct. Obviously, we're going to update branding, board membership, and superintendent information. And then we've heard from many groups to separate disrespect and insubordination into 2 infractions. So the current definition, if you read it there, is really a definition of insubordination. This is a refusal or failure to follow a direction or a directive. We're proposing to add a definition for disrespect, which would be any deliberate or overt action, including verbal and nonverbal actions, with the intent to interrupt, undermine, or disregard established classroom or campus rules. And this would encompass things that are considered impolite, rude, or offensive, and that demean, degrade, antagonize, or humiliate a person or group. So this is everything that would be below harassment and bullying in that category.
And this was also on the advice of some of our district committees that, and our teacher and admin, because we looked at disrespect and insubordination, they're being very 2 separate and distinct infractions.
So as we look at this, one of the reasons we are recommending making this separation is to give us better data. And currently, insubordination, disrespect is the 2nd highest reason for classroom referral. and has been for the last several years. So we're looking at trying to get that to be more granular so we can determine better interventions and actions that can happen at the school to prevent insubordination and disrespect. You'll also notice in this data that we're projecting right now what our extrapolated data should look like by the end of the school year of the 2024-2025 school year. Currently, we took our Q1 data and extrapolated that out to what it would look like at the end of the year. And at this point, we look like we're on target to reduce most of our major offenses in the district.
Another proposed update is amending the consequence for drug use and possession. So this was a change that we made last year and we implemented this year. With the current one, you can see the first, second, and third consequences. And the proposed amendment is a little bit more significant on the second offense. So with the second, we were proposing level 3 with up to 5 days OSS. That's our current. And with our second, it would now move to a level 2. And this gives schools the opportunity, if they do want to recommend a reassignment to Success Academy, they can do that with a second drug offense. Another proposed, our standard update, we're updating all of our web links, all of our QR codes to make sure that those are current. We're also looking to amend our consequences for bullying. Right now in the current code, it's a level 4. Our proposal is for it to be a level 3, which this provides the opportunity for a SARC review. That's the Success Academy Review Committee. So a school could not necessarily send a student directly to Success Academy, but based on the specific circumstances, they could ask the review committee to look at the situation and see if Success Academy placement is appropriate.
And then one of our other proposed updates is to amend the consequences to sexual offenses. These are, sexual offenses are a category in the Code of Conduct. Typically, these are consensual acts that happen on campus, but they run the gamut between things such as inappropriate behavior in the hallway all the way up to a sexual act that may happen on campus. So our current code keeps these at level 3, with the first time being a level 3, repeated with a level 3 with a SARC review. And we're proposing that we separate these into minor first. These would be minor events, would be a level 3, and minor repeated being level 3 with a SARC review, but also adding a category of major sexual offenses. These would be sexual acts that are done out in the open or in the presence of adults or other students on campus. And we're recommending that these be considered at a level 2 and giving, the administrators the option to pursue recommendation to Success Academy. We're also going to talk about changes to the electronic telecommunications device section and making recommendations there.
So looking at this is the current electronic telecommunication devices policy. And basically what it allows for is discretion, administrator discretion for the phone to be used in the school or in the classroom, basically anywhere in the school with discretion. In a review of policy, we find of the very large districts, when we compare them, their policies, some permit for instructional, some permit for administrative discretion, so we outline those. Now in practice, there are some larger districts who have more restrictive policies for cell phone. This is their current written policy that they have on their sites, but we are aware of some of the larger districts this year that have implemented some more restrictive cell phone policies on their campuses. And when we looked at our current school procedures, because we do have differences from school to school, And we asked our schools what their current procedures were, and about 14% said they do allow some cell phone use. So that's in line with our high schools. So at elementary and most middle schools are not allowing cell phone use at all, but our high schools do have some level of cell phone use in the schools. And when we talked with those groups, we surveyed all of our principals, but we specifically made sure we had outreach to each high school to get some information from them. The elementary and middle were in favor of having a policy where there is no, it is in the bag, put away from bell to bell. At the high school, 13 of the 50 schools would prefer the phone off during academic time, but would like some discretion during non-academic times. This would be like the hallway, the cafeteria. So that was the feedback that we received from our schools. So here's our current proposal for changes regarding devices, that they may possess them. So this is very similar to our old personal wireless communication while on school grounds. Includes but not limited to cell phones, auxiliary devices, that includes watches, earbuds, and all personal wireless communication devices must be turned off and in the student's book bag at all times. At the high school level and at discretion of the administration, wireless communication devices may be permitted in non-instructional spaces such as cafeterias. At all levels, wireless communication devices are permitted when the device is approved by the school to be used to monitor a health condition documented through medical records.
So at this time, this is our current timeline, and we are on target to meet this timeline for bringing the student code of conduct for students forward for board action in March. Currently, we're at our pre-briefing. We will continue to work on the code and meet with our stakeholder groups to provide revisions based on feedback and bring that forward to our first board reading in February. And then upon approval anticipated in March, we will then finalize, print, and distribute the student code of conduct.
So at this time, we'd like to bring it to the superintendent for superintendent's comments and board discussion on the proposals.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation, very thorough and very in-depth. As you all know, the team has been working very diligently to secure stakeholder feedback, to use the good information that they have in their years of education, and working with, again, a variety of stakeholders on this updated code. This is a very important conversation to have today. We've talked about at this table before since my election and since my two colleagues, my fellow board members, were elected. School safety is paramount. That is, I know our entire board, our whole governance team shares that philosophy, that school safety is our #1 responsibility. Obviously, student achievement is extremely important, but nothing is going to happen that's going to be productive unless it's in a safe environment. So just want to publicly appreciate the team for their work on this, and we look forward to your conversation and your discussion today.
Board members, any comments, questions? Mr. Persons?
Just a couple of comments on the cell phone policy. You said they prefer to have it off during instructional activity. I believe that's a state law now, right? They're not allowed to have it on during classroom time. So there's really no choice there. I'm fine with elementary, middle school. High school worries me a little bit, less of the cafeteria than in the hallways. So I'm just worried that seems where a lot of the trouble starts as they're in between, they're talking and on their phones, meet me at this place or whatever. But it's much better than it was, you know, where they had unused cell phones, so keep monitoring it. I'm glad to see the incidents of violence and everything else are going down. I hope that stays. That's a great trend. So that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Shaviano?
In regards to the cell phones, specifically for high school, I guess for the time that they have when they're walking to their classes. It's not a lot of time, right, that they have to kind of shuffle and get to one end to the other. So the use of cell phones during that time I don't think is critical or important. I really don't see the value there. Personally, I would love to see it gone during that time. They should just be getting to class. If we had to give a little during lunch, I guess they could connect, but then it's everyone on their cell phones and no one is talking to each other during lunch, so that's kind of sad to see. So that's so if we can, I don't know, I'd say a little stricter and remove it just altogether and just free during lunch, I'm okay with. But during the hallway, they should just be getting to class.
Mr. Ribble.
Yeah, I have a few comments. First of all, I applaud the presentation. You folks have worked hard over the last several years. I've seen you get a little bit better, moving the needle with accountability of students' behavior each and every year. I was pleased to see you have Talc and Spalk involved with this thing. There was a piece over the years that you folks used to report on, was a percent of parents that signed off on the code of conduct. How are we doing with that? Are we still moving the needle with getting more parents to accept the responsibility of signing off?
So we would get that information from the focus team, and we can get that for you, and I can provide that to Superintendent Carlin for you.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of parent meetings in the community, so that'd be good to have that number. One other thing, I don't know how many folks were on social news shows on Sunday, but there was a great show that was on Sunday morning, and there was a professor by the name of Jonathan Haidt who's written a book, The Anxious Society. And it's a 400-page book. I spent a lot of time doing the Cliff Note version. I didn't go through all 400 pages, but I did go through the book. If you have any concerns about cell phone usage in the schools, refer to his book. When you're done with those 400 pages, you know we don't need to have cell phones in schools. It affects the lack of social behavior. Students don't know how to interact with each other. They can't have a conversation. They were talking about several schools they went in to that were restricted at lunchtime, and they couldn't believe the difference in noise that happened because folks actually were talking to each other rather than sitting there and staring on their phone. But Dr. Hoyt, HIDT, The Anxious Society, look it up. You'll be convinced to support our code of conduct here in Lee County. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Fisher, then Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I appreciate it. I'm a bit torn on this. I know, well, most of this board, I should say, we talked about actually implementing essentially what the elementary and middle school, essentially the total ban a couple months ago. I know we were possibly considering amending it. That I get, and I've mentioned this with during our meeting. I understand, part of it obviously is making sure, obviously, enforcement. I mean, high school principals have so much on their plate. I'm very torn. I know a couple of us have some high school students up on this dais, and unfortunately, those phones, what they can be used for, including, even, filming, fights and stuff like that. I mean, that's a consistent issue. So, at the moment, I'm not on board going forward, but I'm still open on that, at least with that. I would be more in favor of going the elementary and middle school model. Forgive the high school principals, I know it's a lot, but at least looking at it right now. We actually, at FSBA, some of us were at a panel that had students talking, and I think was maybe Osceola County, there was a student from there that actually talked about, they weren't in favor of the ban. They talked about it, went through it, and then actually after they adapted to it, they were good with it. They didn't even question anymore at that point. So I know it'd be a big move on that part. But the other part of it comes down to, obviously, and we've had this discussion with Dr. Carlin, is, the changes throughout the code of conduct are great. I appreciate it, but it comes down to enforcement and equal level of enforcement with schools. And I know that's an issue I know that you've been addressing. So, but that's where I'm at the moment. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan.
I think everybody pretty much has spoken about it, but the hallways for sure, I see no sense in that for what Ms. Chaviano just spoke about, because first of all, they need to be paying attention to where they're going, not looking at a phone. That drives me nuts. And then to the earbuds, how in the world would you even know if it's on or off? So they should never be in their ears. I mean, you need them to be focused. And yeah, I'm iffy on the other as well. And I have plenty of grandkids out there that are probably really mad that I'm saying that, but they're there to learn. So thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So I'm excited to hear what my other fellow colleagues think of this. I had a great discussion with Dr. Bradley and their team regarding this, and I actually agree with you. That's more of a distraction in the hallway, and they probably shouldn't have them in the hallways at all. I mean, or out of their book bag at that point. Because I think once it's out, it's a distraction, and then they're going to be late to class, or they'll have an excuse. I mean, and they won't say their phone's their excuse, but because that'll be, at that point in time, it'll be probably put back in their book bag. But I think you have all made great points that I think that we really are concerned, because I watched the Vero started this year, and we talked about this. Vero started with no cell phones, and the kids testified that they didn't miss it. They didn't mind it. In fact, they enjoyed the conversation at lunch. And I saw a whole different, they did a whole video on it, because I don't believe it was news. I believe it was on their, it was something that came up on my Facebook news feed or feed. And the students didn't mind it. So I would think that's a sampling of really how kids will take it and embrace it versus really complain. Because I think we have to get back to relationships, and I think that's what's happening with the phones are interfering with relationships. We don't have them, including respect, because how do you respect a phone that you can control? And that's really their conversation, and that's where their relationship is with the phone. So, not the people. Thank you.
Any other comments? I just have a few. If you go back to slide 9, it discussed the data. There it is. So if you go to quarter 1, and it says electronics telecommunications at 874 in subordinate reports so far. And then in the footnotes, it talks about the fact that this data doesn't include hallways, cafeterias, PE and recess. So that's very alarming to me, that the projection is 3,500, and that doesn't even include the areas that we're discussing that we may or may not let them use their cell phones. I think that's really quite high. I have 3 kids myself, one high schooler, and the biggest problem is the inconsistency, not with just from school to school, but class to class. Some teachers let them, some teachers don't. Not sure why they're letting them if it's part of their own conduct in their school, that the teacher should comply to. To me, that's also, I guess I'm going to look at this as a team-oriented view, but if I've got teacher down the hallway, peer teacher of mine down the hallway, and these are kids' terms, okay, so forgive me for not being as more professional here, but we've got the cool teacher down the hallway that lets them use their phone anytime, but we've got the teacher that's truly trying to stick to curriculum, and the kids behave for one differently than they behave for the other, especially at the high school level. I mean, I've seen it for myself. If you haven't had the opportunity, board members, to take a visit through a high school and ask to see a bell change, that will be eye-opening at a high school. Just ask to see what it looks like when that bell rings, students walking with headphones, heads down on their phone, because it is happening at several of our schools. Like I said, it's eye-opening. I support bell-to-bell, K through 12. I'm very familiar with the Bishop Vero and some other private school processes and policies that they have in place, and it has provided nothing but positive results. And the kids, they do appreciate the actual opportunity to have conversation. I think that unfortunately, when we went through COVID and went through, a lot of online learning, relationships were stripped away from kids 5 years old, 4 years old, 15 years old, 18 years old that were supposed to graduate that year. And I think that we really need to try to start separating ourselves from what happened in 2020. But the two schools, this is interesting to me. On the slide that you said 13 out of 15 schools, yeah, slide 16. At the high school level, 13 of 15 schools would prefer the phones off during academic time. I'm just curious, what were the other two schools in favor of? Bell to bell, or anything goes?
Well, we do have one school currently who does not allow bell to bell. The other one was more just academic time. But we have one high school right now that for the past 3 years has not allowed phones bell to bell.
And I would love to see that data, that school compared to our other schools. How are they doing? And like we said, safety first, student achievement second. So I'd love to see that pulled from that school in a one-on-one. You could bring that up. That'd be great. But I appreciate the presentation. I know a lot of hard work has gone into this as a parent who has very little time. The fact that you've condensed it alone has helped so many families get through this, and I know that they can look it up so much easier on the website and type in a keyword and it pops up. So I appreciate the effort of the entire team going through this and making it more user-friendly. But that's all the comments I have. Are there any other follow-up comments or questions? Mr. Persons, and then Attorney DePay.
I just want to say, the one thing I've gotten from parents is, what if there's an emergency? Well, the students are allowed to have their phone in their backpack. It just has to be off. So if there was an emergency, I'm sure there's not one teacher's going to say, oh, you can't use your phone. You know, I mean, if there's something along those lines, like we all worry about. And the other one they said was, well, if it's off and I need to get a hold of them, how can I get a hold of them? You call the office like they did for years, forever. And they'll send someone down to get your child or get a message to them. And the last thing I get told a lot, when I brought this up 2 years ago, is the buses. You know, we have a tracking system, but the phone is actually a better tracking system. So a lot of the kids turn their phones on when they're in the bus, and the parents knows exactly where the bus is at that particular time. So I just want to point out, we're not saying they can't bring a phone to school. You know, because some schools around the state, you put it in a bag at the beginning of the day or whatever, or in every classroom, and they really go way out. We haven't gone that far at all. We're just saying, please have it off. And I agree with the majority of this board. I think bell to bell in all the schools is where maybe we're at here, but what I've heard. Thank you.
I think that's it for this topic. Oh, I'm sorry. Attorney DePay Bruno.
Thank you. Just for clarification too, because Mr. Persons mentioned that it's the law now, so I just wanted to put it on the record what law he was referencing, which is Florida Statute 1006.07 subsection 2, which discusses the code of conduct. It makes it very explicit that you cannot have a cell phone during instructional time, and that the teachers are supposed to actually put it someplace so that the students are not able to use it. So that's just for clarification.
Thank you very much. And first of all, again, just thank you for the conversation today. One of the reasons we bring items to you, especially important items like this, is to hear how you feel relative to this topic. And like we said at the top of the presentation, the team did a great job getting stakeholder feedback, but very important to hear your feedback. So when we come back to you with a recommendation, we are hearing the general feeling of our board members. And I've been taking copious notes over here in terms of some of your questions as well as your comments. And we will take that back to our cabinet, to our team, and have that final conversation before we bring something back to you. Mr. Ribble, you asked a question about the code of conduct being acknowledged. I do have that information. 72% in focus have acknowledged the code of conduct. And so that is obviously something we continue to work on. So thank you again for the conversation.
Thank you. We can continue to adult code of conduct? Okay.
So for the adult code, there are no significant changes this year. There is one change where they included tobacco and vaping and some consequences for that, starting with a warning. But their other changes all pertain to their logo, updating board members, any errors they may find, any spacing, things like that. So when there is any legislative, so last year when we had the unauthorized restroom, that was something that impacted our code. It also impacted their code. But for this year, they only have really, with the exception of adding the tobacco and vaping, all of the other changes are more updates or typographical for the adult code. The one thing I will say is that when you see this again next month, because we'll see you again in February, and then the final approval will be in March. When you see their code next month for adult code, you will also see it in Spanish and Creole. That was a request from previous board, and we have made a point this year to have those available after we get your feedback at this one, and we put them in the red line to have that available in all 3 languages.
All right, thank you. Any comments? Ms. Jordan?
And it's going back, and I apologize. The infractions, because I know Ms. Fleming had spoke about that. It's the one where the infraction is the disrespect and insubordination. And I know that a lot of the conversation came to be because of the fact of what is it understood? How are they understanding it? Are they really being disrespectful? Or are they really being insubordinate? So I really appreciate that you are going to separate that, because of a lot of times the language barrier does create that of what they believe that they're being disrespectful when they're really not understanding what the heck's going on. So thank you for that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as they are exiting, we're going to go ahead and move on with next thing on the agenda, which is our policy review. Presenting our policy review today is Attorney Kathy Dupay-Bruno and Benny Brophy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board. We have 3 policies for the Board's consideration today. One of them is public participation at board meetings, 0169.1, and then 0175, which is the student disciplinary hearing, and 0176, which is employee disciplinary hearings. The 2 hearings, the changes are very minor, but they are significant to ensure that there is as much due process as we possibly can give for the student as well as the staff when charges are brought forward and discipline is a potentiality. So instead of having the parent or the employee state their case or explain why the discipline is not appropriate, and then have the district then move forward with their allegations, we are asking that it be flipped around so that the district can state their case first, and then the parent or the employee has an opportunity to respond. Any questions or concerns about those 2 policies? Okay. And then the next policy is 0169.1. As the board is aware, there's been a significant change due to a case that came out in October 2024, Moms for Liberty versus Brevard County, in which the 11th Circuit made some rulings as to solidifying and increasing, if you will, some of the First Amendment rights to include the ability for members of the public to levy attacks, if you will, or personal attacks is what they've called them in the case. The reason for that is to ensure that there is not viewpoint discrimination when people come to speak. The board is responsible to the public. The public has the right to say positive things as well as negative things, and the 11th Circuit reiterated that. So we have removed personal attacks from the policy. And we have also defined a little bit more in terms of what abusive language is, and that's also coming from the case, wherein that particular district did not have that definition. So we've now added that definition into our policy to ensure that the public is aware of what we consider to be abusive language. And we also, of course, state that prior to public comment as well. Any questions from the board or concerns on those and that policy? All right. Madam Vice Chair, do we have the ability now to move this forward to second reading?
Board, can I get a thumbs up if you all are ready to move on to second?
Thank you very much.
Looks like you have that. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a presentation by Lori Brooks regarding mental health.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present on school mental health. Dr. Duncan and I will share our presentation with you. And first, I would like to recognize the School Counseling and Mental Health Services team because they work very diligently on mental health along with our larger student services team. And that would be, if you could wave, Mary Lynn Rodriguez, Sherry Wenzel, and Meredith Berry. Today's presentation will begin with the development of school-based mental health services, which really began in 2018 in the state of Florida. We'll then define comprehensive school mental health services offered under Florida statute, and then we'll conclude with the future expansion of services. This graphic really represents the continuum since July 2018 of school-based mental health. School-based mental health services in Florida, as you well know, began with Senate Bill 7026, which was the legislative result to address or in response to the tragic shooting on February 14th, 2018 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Senate Bill 7026 defined new school safety and school-based mental health initiatives. So it really was that game-changing piece of legislation that married together school safety measures and also how are the children? What are we doing to address their mental and emotional wellness as well as the interventions for those with indicated need? It set forth a recurring allocation under the General Appropriations Act for mental health in schools based on unweighted FTE, and it established the requirement that districts must submit a board-approved mental health assistance allocation plan annually on August 1st of each year and report outcomes for mental health on September 30th of each year to the Department of Education. So as you can see when you review this graphic, we started with Senate Bill 7026, and throughout the years there have been some fine-tuning measures and then also future and continued build-out of services. So the first bill, 7026, really addressed school safety and mental health services. Then Senate Bill 7030 added additional layers and requirements to those requirements. In September of 2019, the State Board of Education passed required instruction, So you can see they're starting to tier in. How are we educating children about what is wellness, how to identify resiliency skills and how to be resilient and cope with the stressors that life can hand us. And then we look at 2019 and also 2022, where we have worldwide stressors of a COVID pandemic. And then we have a local pretty intensive stressor of Hurricane Ian. And we are now in our 7th year of mental health services. And as we frequently discuss as a team, where would we be now if we did not have this legislation and accompanying funding since 2018? Because prior to 2018, we had support for students. We lacked mental health. So this timeline really encompasses a lot of those initiatives and how the Department of Education and our state legislature has built out supports for children. I don't want to overlook July 2021 with Senate Bill 590, which also codified a lot of best practices districts, including ours, were following when working with students with suicidal ideation, and they put them into the law, however, so we know we need to follow them and continue to work on that process and how we handle that. So the district mental health plan, as I mentioned, was one of the main requirements of 7026, and there are 3 components to each district's mental health plan. By legislation, the plan must support students, and all of the funding must be pushed into mental health. And so we align and expand our school-based mental health services. We have master's degreed and very talented school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, and licensed mental health professionals in our schools. This pulls all of those professionals together into a teaming mode, and then also we're called to contract with our partnering agencies such as Salus Care and other community partners to increase access for students and families to school-based mental health during the day, and then also connecting them to outside services if necessary or desired by the families. And then also training teachers and staff, which now we also have required instruction for students, because we know our eyes and ears are our teachers and our staff in the schools. And without them having the training on what is wellness, what is a concern, what does that look like, and then where to go with that information, we would be unable to engage our students in these services to the extent that we have been able to do so. Comprehensive school mental health is a broad spectrum from prevention and assessment through intervention and at times postvention. For example, we provide district crisis support for mental health when we have swatting incidents, when we have the loss of a staff member or a student, all the way through any other school-based incident that could create, or natural disaster that could create exposure to trauma. The comprehensive mental health is essential to our schools' ability to ensure safe and healthy learning environments, support students' academic success, and also identify and respond appropriately to mental health challenges. And we dovetail with a community-based service coordinated system of care. We are called not just to be a school district, we are actually charged with engaging in our community-based partners. Our parents are the most important partners, along with our students, and create that system of care approach. We also practice evidence-based practices. And while we have always done this as a school district, it was nice to also see this embedded into the requirements in state statute to ensure that districts are following. We're not spraying and praying and hoping it works. We need to absolutely operate in tiers of support. We need to conduct needs assessments and then map our resources to where they're needed. We engage an interdisciplinary team, what I would call collecting and connecting the dots of a student's, the kind of the fabric of their life at school and outside of school. And we collect data, analyze, and report it. And then, of course, we adapt what we're doing based on that data. We engage in evidence-based treatments, and then we are called to diversify our funding and consistently grow our partnerships.
So when we look at the system of supports, we can see at this triangle that there are some things that all students get. So at all schools, we want them to be creating a culture where students are building their resiliency, where they have a positive outlook, and where they also feel comfortable accessing supports. Here's where they can access bullying prevention, they can build their social skills, and this is where we talk about PBIS at this level where everybody gets it. At the next level, this is where some students will get supports. And this is where we're connecting some students with community resources. There might be a check-in and check-out where we see the student in the morning and then again at the end of the day, but they may be doing their own thing for the majority of the day successfully. It's targeted in sort of a small group approach. And then you get to the top of the triangle, and we have a few students who fall at the top of the triangle. And this is where the more coordinated supports are, where they have the more individualized services, where they may be meeting with a mental health professional, getting crisis prevention services or crisis intervention services, and also accessing the community-based mental health supports. In our schools, we have school mental health teams, and this team is made up of a variety of very valuable professionals and school-based staff. The team meets weekly. They employ a fact-based problem-solving model. So they'll review the existing supports that a student is receiving, and they'll also look at any potential new students who may need supports. And they'll look at that data and observe behaviors to say, what are the student needs? Are we meeting the student needs, or do we need to adjust the supports that that student is receiving? And that mental health team is made up of the school counselor, the school social worker, the school psychologist, a licensed mental health professional, and those acronyms you see at the end are potential licensures, where it could be a licensed mental health clinician, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed family therapist. So there are different things, but all of these individuals are licensed. And then the school nurse. And then input is also provided by, and extremely valuable, provided by the parent, guardian, the student, teachers, administrators, any community service providers that the student is working with. If the student is served in ESE or is getting ESOL supports, anybody who can speak to those supports. And then again, anybody else who might be an important part of that student's world.
Those mental health team meetings also with parental consent could involve an outside service agency or agencies. So that's something I did not put on the slide, but whenever a student's involved in outside services, especially intensive mental health, as long as the parent has signed consent for that individual to be present to discuss that student, they also participate in those team meetings just related to that student. So in 2018, districts had to move quickly. Legislation passed, it went into effect July 1st, and districts, honestly, we were scrambling to implement school-based mental health, and we made it happen and we made it work. However, as we exited the 18-19 school year and we meet as state directors of mental health, districts were grappling with, we needed an additional position, and many moved to the licensed mental health professional position as an additional member of the school-based mental health team. And Lee County also moved in that direction. So now we have licensed mental health professionals in addition to our school counselors, social workers, psychologists, and school nurses. And their primary role is the supervision and quality assurance of mental health implementation. We want to make sure that we are compliant with our statutory requirements and those timelines, direct support of the comprehensive mental health services. The LMHP, we call them in short, because you know we're all about acronyms in education. The LMHPs deliver the most intensive mental health interventions to students with indicated need. And also they are an integral part of providing interventions as part of the school-based threat management team. If a student that is a part of the threat management team needs intensive intervention, they are the ones providing that, of course, with parental consent, and then also offering evidence-based trainings to staff, parents, and students. We have a little laundry list of additional LMHP functions here, but I'll jump to staffing. Currently, we staff 57 LMHP positions from the mental health assistance allocation. Our growth in that position is based on 3 pieces of information. One, our data. We look at the number of mental health needs and the acuity of those needs at each of our schools. We also obtain our school leaders' feedback and school mental health team members' feedback regarding their needs and how well they're able to meet those needs. And then also it's based, of course, on the annual mental health assistance allocation increases, because without that funding, we would not be adding positions. And of course, the indicated need needs to be there to add any additional positions. So we've grown each year. Now we're going to shift to really talk about what do we do to assist students that may be in crisis mode. So students who exhibit signs or verbalizations of suicide ideation. So the district, we followed best practices, and then I mentioned Senate Bill 590, which went into effect, and we actually, we applaud that legislation because it codified, as I mentioned earlier, the requirements statewide for districts to follow. So when a student of concern is brought to a mental health team member, they are required to deliver a Department of Education approved suicide risk assessment. There are 2 of them. This district does we use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, or what we call the Columbia in short. It's administered by a school-based mental health professional. And also, we are required to be trained in and engage in verbal de-escalation while we're also talking to the student. And this is an open-ended conversation. It's not a checklist where we just coldly ask students questions. It's a conversation and also verbal de-escalation. The required level of response is based on the assessment results. And so if we have a student who has a little bit of, they might be thinking, I don't want to wake up tomorrow, but they have no means, no plan. And these levels are indicated on this evidence-based instrument. We have levels of response. The levels of response always will include the parent. And I will tell you, full disclosure, we have had to make significant progress on how we implement this protocol, and you'll see in our numbers that we're working diligently on reducing the number of students placed under a Baker Act. So we involve parents. We are required to make a reasonable attempt to notify parent guardian of a minor student. A reasonable attempt means that we are required to try phone, text, email the parent and also an emergency contact so that we can at some point, we have got to get in touch with that parent or guardian. And we have to document, we're required to document and report to the Department of Education the time of each contact, the method, and the outcome until we achieve contact with someone. Now, if we reach out to an emergency contact, we are unable to share details with them. But we are charged with letting the emergency contact know, can you please get in touch with the parent of this child? We absolutely must speak with them immediately. So we are also required to make a reasonable attempt, schools are, to contact a licensed mental health professional prior to the initiation of an involuntary examination under the Baker Act. And we are required to enter each of these. If we have a Baker Act, we're required to enter this into the state reporting system. The state reporting system allows no field to be unfilled. So as you can see, there is a level of oversight from the Department of Education where we are required to follow this protocol and be specific about it. And also, if we cannot leave something blank, we have to explain what we did. So I'd like to talk through some of our data. I have data from 22-23, 23-24, and thus far this school year through December 6th. What you'll notice in this data is the number of Baker Acts in column 1, and then the number of students placed under a Baker Act in the second column. The difference in those numbers is the fact that we have some students that are high acuity students that have multiple agencies involved in their world, and they may have an involuntary examination under a Baker Act at school more than once. So that's why you'll see the higher number in the first column. When you look at the number of Baker Acts administered by the Mobile Crisis Response Team, and I'll cover the team in just a minute, this is that clinical team that has to really engage in additional verbal de-escalation. We want the parent or guardian to be present, to be part of that process, unless there's a suspicion of abuse, and then we're required to document that we had to call DCF. And then also, they engage, sometimes this takes up to 2 hours for this clinical team to work with the student, the parent guardian, to identify protective factors, to really feel comfortable that that child will be safe being released to go home rather than being involuntarily hospitalized. When the mobile crisis team is unable to report, the next person charged in statute is our school resource officer with making that assessment. And so you'll notice that our number of Baker Acts initiated by mobile crisis and the number initiated by the school resource officers in each row will total the total number of Baker Acts, because those are the only two ways that an individual can be placed under a Baker Act while at school. Medical doctors can also do this, as you probably well know. We don't have those at our schools, so that's why we have these divided out. Now, you may wonder, if we're doing mental health and we're doing it well, why in 23-24 did our number of involuntary examinations go up from 129 to 163? And what we see is anytime we have a stressor, and you've probably heard this related to COVID all over national news media outlets, just as we see the decline in academic performance, but it takes a year or two for that to really reveal itself, we see mental health crises in a delayed reaction after things like COVID, but this was the response to Hurricane Ian. So after Hurricane Ian, we were pushing out all sorts of access to resources, groups for students, groups for teachers to process through, parent supports, and they really are underutilized while people are putting one foot in front of the other, just trying to survive day to day, and then all of a sudden we start to see that they're ready for that support and to access that support. Unfortunately, there are times that we're unable to see that until we have a student in crisis. So we continue to work on becoming better at early identification. And so you'll notice in 24-25, almost through the end of first semester, we are running lower numbers on our involuntary examinations. So I think this is twofold. One, we're trying to mitigate and working through helping our students with their response to the hurricane and also some carryovers from the pandemic. But second, we're getting better at making sure we're able to support our students. And when the mobile crisis team comes, and I'll move on to the slides that describe this team, their entire goal is de-escalation and connection to services. The last resort for the mobile crisis team, being a clinical assessment team, is to place someone involuntarily into SALIS care or another local facility. So the Mobile Crisis Response Team is our Circuit 20 Mobile Crisis Response Team. It's through the Center for Progress and Excellence. We have a very robust partnership with them. They have added teams to serve our schools during the school day with additional grant funding. And part of state statute is that school districts partner with their mobile crisis team. So when we deliver the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, and it indicates that we have a level of ideation that warrants clinical assessment, we're calling the parent guardian, and we're also asking the mobile crisis team to come to the school so that all of them can get together and engage in de-escalation, the team can, and further clinical assessment. Again, their goal is to reduce the number of involuntary examinations through active crisis intervention techniques. If they're successful at de-escalating a student, their next step is connecting the parent to services and follow up mental health. And then we also support them at school. In the spring, and I'll take you back to the number of Baker Acts on slide 13, from the mobile crisis team and then from the SROs. We have identified and been building out our own team for the past 3 years. And because we now are almost fully staffed with our 57 LMHPs, by spring of this year, we should be ready to deploy our district care team. That's our crisis assessment, response, and education team. That's our own mobile crisis team. We will still engage Circuit 20, but if they're unavailable, our next resource was our school resource officer. Now our next resource will be our own mobile crisis team in the district of licensed professionals. Our school resource officers want to invite mobile crisis in. They welcome this next layer of clinical assessment as well, because their least favorite part of their job is when they have to make this assessment. And so each region will have a dedicated care team ready to deploy. And so if Circuit 20 is unable to come to the school, then our own team will come to the school. And then we'll move into community partnerships.
So in order to support students, we know that the school district cannot do all of this alone. We rely heavily on community partnerships, and the student services team, specifically in this case, the mental health team works diligently to maintain those partnerships. So you can see here, they are closely involved with several different areas: Lee Health, Salus Care. We have several members of our team who actually volunteer with these organizations. So this just isn't an MOU on paper. This is actual working day-to-day collaboration, and that is a critical component of student success.
Building resiliency is First Lady DeSantis's initiative, and when the State Board of Education passed their required instruction rules in 2019, this became the state graphic, and this really does encompass staff training and also the mental health assistance allocation. It's all of the pieces that pull together for our students. And then this particular part of that, this component, is how do we really help students understand that they have coping skills. We can develop coping skills so that when life stressors touch their life, they can identify previously through this instruction what might work for them. Yoga doesn't work for me, it might work for Dr. Duncan. Yoga makes me angry. I don't like it. She might love it. But how do I know that I have coping strategies and what I like unless I've had education that makes me think about that? So the resiliency building, we call it Wellness Wednesdays. In 2019, when this was developed, we focus grouped it. We did a lot of research with students, teachers, parents, administrators, and we've branded Wellness Wednesday. As with anything else, we need to revisit that periodically, and we are at this time. And we're really working through what could this look like and should it look like as we move forward. One of the pieces of Wellness Wednesday that I think is really valuable is we ask parents, we give them a letter every month, the week of Wellness Wednesday, about the lesson topic. We post the video on leeschools.net, and we ask them to engage in conversation with their child around their learning, because they are such an important part of this resiliency education. And we would like to see that continue, whatever this looks like as we move forward.
And again, just to provide clarification on this, that the Wellness Wednesday is required health instruction. So while it may look differently and we are reassessing, we do have to make sure that we meet the state requirements related to that instruction.
We also engage in parent awareness and education. Likely you've seen our monthly newsletters that are released by our team. Here are just some screenshots. We also have a school-based mental health services flyer that schools will distribute to families that actually contains the names of their school mental health team members and contact information. And we also use it at the district level so that families understand what they can have access to should they choose school-based mental health services. And then our mental health and wellness portal is live on our school district website for parents and the community. Even if they're up at 2 a.m. and they'd like to click on some resources, they have access to this.
So on this slide, this just highlights some of the work that's in progress. We currently are in conversations with the University of South Florida on a couple of projects. One of the projects is MIDAS, and this is with the early identification and screening of students who may have some mental health needs. This mental health team are working very closely with our school psychology department on this, as they may be very involved with this component in terms of using a screener and producing a risk ratio to say what needs a student might have, like how significant or severe the student's needs are at this time. So that's just one of the things in the works right now.
And then another project through USF is the SMARTS project for school mental health assessment, response, and training for suicide prevention. This would target up to 10 middle schools, and USF provides staff training in suicide awareness and intervention, evidence-based interventions even at the mental health level, and care coordination. And it really provides a pathway for schools to become a Department of Education suicide prevention certified school, which we have a great interest in providing a pathway for our schools to become certified in suicide prevention, which means their staff has been trained in suicide prevention training, evidence-based, and also how to connect students to that support that might be expressing concerning statements or behavior. So those are potential expansions that we are in discussions with USF regarding now. And that will lead us to superintendent's comments and board discussion.
Well, thank you, Dr. Duncan, and always Ms. Brooks. I know that this is an area of passion for you, certainly, and just really appreciate your knowledge and expertise. To our board members, I know that this was a presentation that has been requested quite a while ago, and so we're very honored to be able to bring that to you today. I just want to thank our team for everything that they do, and I'm talking about our team, not just here at the district office, but most especially in our schools, for the work they do each and every day with our students. Obviously our mission is to educate students, but we also take their behavioral and their mental health very seriously. And so we turn it over to you now for your discussion.
Board members, comments or questions? Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Brooks and Dr. Duncan and Dr. Carlin and Dr. Savage as well. I requested this a few superintendents ago, so I really appreciate that we're now able to discuss this. This is a vital topic, especially coming off the recent hurricanes, especially the things we've seen in the schools. First off, thank you for addressing Wellness Wednesdays. I look forward to seeing some of the information, feedback on that. I know a lot of us receive a lot of in-person feedback on some of those, so I appreciate that. Regarding a couple things, and I kind of asked you this both last time, what can we, as a board, as a district, what can we do better to help out, resource-wise? I mean, I know legislatively we're asking for mental health allocation. I mean, I know that, as the ESSER funds have run out, there's, obviously some changes and transitions with that, funding and positions, but what can we do as a board and a district to help out and make sure that the services are still being, a service provided, but help increase the level of services to our students?
I think the first part that we really appreciate is your willingness to just meet with our team and listen to the work that's done and listen to the concerns, questions, wins, successes out in the school and bring those to us. Anytime we do that and we work collaboratively as a team, that's a win for us because our team is diligent. They will put in 110%, but they aren't a large team, and with a district this large, with all of us doing that, that's going to be helpful. You mentioned with ESSER funds. Ms. Brooks talked about the increase in the mental health allocation, so that's helped to alleviate some of that, but we're always looking at different ways to use resources differently. I think you also pointed out with Wellness Wednesday, just the information that is feedback that you do get out, that our students and staff do understand that that is required instruction. So while we want that feedback on the best way to provide that and ensure we meet that compliance, that we do it in a way that also works for them. So that's also something I think as board members that would be helpful. Ms. Brooks, do you?
Thank you again for asking that question and for the opportunity to present. I would also, I think where we struggle is also qualified staff. And I don't know that that's something the board might be able to fix. I think we struggle with this across the state. We have a shortage of school counselors. We have a shortage of school psychologists. Those are the two really critical areas. And I mention that just so that it's within your context as we're trying to encourage individuals to pursue that specialized training through the master's and EDS programs. And we appreciate the board's support tremendously for our students.
One more thing, Madam Chair, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And also getting back to parental awareness, and you guys put a lot of stuff out, and I'm kind of, unfortunately sometimes, like you guys had mentioned, things are not seen until it's too far down the road, and, parents not necessarily being aware of the services, even so you put a lot out. I'm wondering, just throwing this out here for the board and the superintendent, maybe look at some kind of mental health campaign or a PSA from a district level, maybe to help increase that awareness. So, but that's all I had. Thank you.
Any other comments, board members? Mr. Persons, then Ms. Jordan.
We currently have 57 licensed mental health professionals for 100,000 or so kids. Mm-hmm. How does that compare to other districts proportionally wise? Do you know that, or, are we way below what other districts are? I'm sure it's not enough, but where do we sort of fall on those lines?
The districts are using their mental health assistance allocation to staff as many as they can. Mostly they're using their allocation specific to that, and their school counselors, social workers, psychologists, and nurses are under district budget. And so I always look at this as a team approach too, because an LMHP is unable to deal with the most intensive needs students if a school doesn't have a school counselor, or if they're missing a team member, then all of that unmet need will kind of roll up to that top of the triangle, where an LMHP is trying to work with a lot more students. So my answer is simple in the fact that they're funding these positions through their allocation. So whatever their allocation is, they generally are spending it on that. And then the other piece to that, though, is out of district budget, the psychologists, social workers, nurses, and school counselors. State statute also says that districts are charged with trying to continue to expand those positions as much as they can through their budgetary means. And so I think it's really beyond the allocation, all of the team members too. So I think we're comparable as far as how we spend our allocation. I know we are. And then it's partnered with, but where are we also with those partnership dollars with the other team members to make sure all tiers of mental health are able to be adequately served at the appropriate tier?
Ms. Jordan, I believe you're next.
Well, this is something that I know it's dear and near to my heart. And when I'm looking at this, and thank you so much for explaining reasonable, because when I read that, I was like, wait a second. Yeah. What, are we going through that again? Yeah. And of course, in our board policy, it states what that exactly is. So I had to go back to look to make sure that we had that in there, because that to me is really important, that it doesn't just say reasonable, that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that we contact that person. And when I was looking at the trained teachers and staff on page 4, is that mandatory or optional?
It's the foundational training is youth mental health first aid training. That is required by job code, per the Department of Education.
Okay.
And so employees that are in, I think there's over 100 job codes on that list, are required to be trained.
Okay.
And then, of course, that is the foundation. And our dream world is we're training everybody. But the funding is supportive of training the required staff, which is a lot of staff. It's everyone from teachers to bus operators to our food service workers. There's a lot of individuals on that list based on job code.
Great. And then also the licensed professionals, I know we just said we have 57. So when we're having the meetings, the school mental health team meets, their meetings weekly?
Yes.
How are we putting all those people together when we don't have the people? So how are we having these meetings when they don't exist? Are we pulling them from other schools? How does that?
So our school counselors, as you're aware, are hired by and staffed at their schools. So they're there 5 days a week. We do have some schools that have not been able to find a school counselor, but ideally they have them. And then our school social workers, psychologists, nurses, and licensed mental health professionals, they're itinerant. So we have 57 LMHPs, but they cover all of our schools. So they have days at each school. Now, each of our high schools has a full-time LMHP. Our K-8 schools have a full-time LMHP. And our elementary and middles get about 2.5 days each. It's dependent on needs, so we don't blanket assign. We really look at the needs and the acuity at each school. But we try to get all of our itinerants and the school counselor in that building on that one meeting day a week. And if we're unable to, they join via like Teams or Zoom. They what do you call that? Not telehealth. Virtual. They do it virtually. And so they're required to meet, but they may not all be in the building on that meeting day.
Okay. And then I'm really glad that we're finally going to get our own team, assessment team, because the fact that we know, even though it says that they're available 24/7, that does not happen. So a lot of times we don't have the full team there making decisions, or there's no de-escalation. It's given to the SRO, who has no choice but to, therefore, send a child somewhere. And I guess I'm curious, because when we're looking at the number of 24, how did we get to that 24 with the SROs? What happened in that case where the 24 had to go to them, which then they would automatically send over to somewhere, regardless if there was de-escalation or anything, they automatically have to send them.
So two conditions have to be met, two different conditions. One, if a child is in imminent danger, putting themselves or others in imminent danger. And remember too, I did not mention this, but from previous presentations, the principal, in Senate Bill 590, it puts the principal of the school, it gives them really better authority to control when does the SRO get involved, as far as if I'm an LMHP, I'm working with a student who may be suicidal, the mobile crisis team, let's say I'm a school counselor, the mobile crisis team cannot report. I cannot go get an SRO. I need to brief my administration and let them know the situation, and they determine if we're going to include the SRO in that, which we really need to, because they're the next person that can vet that, right? So it's imminent danger that needs to be mitigated in that moment. And then it's also, if the mobile crisis team from Circuit 20 is unable to get to the school, and we did add in though, if the child's going to after school program in elementary school, we can wait for them to arrive. That's the other piece. If the student, even though it's the end of the day, we let them know this child is in aftercare, parent is on the way, we'll wait for you. And mobile crisis team will report as soon as they can. But if they're unable to report to the school in an hour or so, then the principal will need to get the student resource officer involved. So those are the two reasons we get to the 24. What we'll have, and I think with the 24 you're mentioning thus far, the Baker Acts by SROs this year, what we'll have next is they'll call our dispatch. If mobile crisis for Circuit 20 cannot get there, they'll call our dispatch and we will deploy the regional team to the school. And that will then be that next layer of clinical assessment.
And I, trust me, I so appreciate everything that you all have done, the team, all of you. It's just the fact that I just want to make sure that we are always making sure that it's consistent and we are doing all of this, that the principals are engaged, because there has been times when that did not happen. And the SRO was there and then it went the other way. And I guess I'm wondering too, have we ever, and this will be my last question, have we ever had a report on those that have been sent by SROs or by us come back to say, why did we send this child there? Because there was no need to, because we know once they're there for 5 days by law. So I would be curious on that.
That's an excellent question. I do not have that data. Once the child is at the receiving facility, it's covered under HIPAA, so unless the parent releases it to us, we're unable to collect that data. And then speaking 7 years into mental health, and really since 2021 with Senate Bill 590, as everyone's getting used to new protocols, and then they really have them more memorized. The process document, just like the board policy, is multiple pages long because we want to spell everything out. We see with greater success our schools understanding and unpacking those situations in alignment. And I think too, that's why even though our numbers went up in 23, 24, but you do look at 85 Baker Acts by Mobile Crisis and 78 by SROs, I can't predict if 78 would go down if we had a secondary team, but I can tell you 85 is a significant number from a clinical team, that we did see that spike. It was more in alignment with student need. And so that need is, we're mitigating those needs, but also we all have a much deeper and more comfortable understanding, even here compared to pulling out the process of what we are required to do.
Ms. Shaviano and then Ms. Giovanelli.
One, thank you for this, and I know we had a lot of conversation when I met with you guys prior. I just wanted additional information on slide 20 where it's the potential expansion with USF for the suicide prevention certified school, what that criteria is and those steps that are required for that to happen, either financial, training, what that looks like for that to happen.
Yes, and I'm happy to send it in writing to Dr. Carlin to release. In short, it's that school staff need to be trained in addition to youth mental health first aid training, they need to be specifically trained in evidence-based suicide prevention training. And so it's an additional training that goes deeper. Youth mental health first aid does talk about how do I address an individual, in this case students, but really anyone. How do I find out, are you really suicidal? Mm-hmm. And then this training goes deeper. And so the school staff would need to be trained, and then it's an annual certification with thresholds that you need to continue to meet with your new staff, that you can maintain that training. And I can get you the list of what's required. It's 3 or 4 things. And then we can be a suicide prevention certified school district, but 100% of our schools need to be certified schools.
Right. Ms. Giovanelli.
And I'll piggyback off the training. Do we give training to any of our guest teachers, and especially our guest teachers that are in our schools weekly? I mean, they are habitual. They're constantly working in our schools, and do they get that opportunity to have that training as well?
With youth mental health first aid training or suicide? The reason I'm hesitating is Chief Newland has been doing the youth mental health first aid training oversight the last few years, and I'm not quite sure if guest teachers are on the list. Yeah. I do not believe they are. We can verify and get that to Dr. Carlin. And so there's a pay component involved that would, there's a fiscal challenge with that. Certainly, we'd be happy to offer training to our guest teachers. There's usually a pay component that needs to be involved. It's a 6-hour training. So it's just something we could talk through.
Well, and I'm just curious because, I think for people that are there to be trained in the awareness and to identify these issues, we have a lot of guest teachers now that work in schools. They're at different schools, but they're working 5 days a week. I mean, and I know several of them. So, I mean, I think that opportunity somehow, I mean, you were talking about 100% and getting, everybody being certified. Well, that would be like, that's kudos if that could happen, in my opinion, on having that knowledge. So that was just curious because that was one of the things a question that was asked that triggered that for me. But one of the other questions is the Wellness Wednesdays. I'll be honest with you, I get a lot of complaints from students. They think it's worthless. So what is the impact? What are the evidence and what are we seeing that this is effective?
So I will state that at our state meetings, districts are grappling with the most effective way to push instruction into classrooms. It's a struggle, and that's why we're revisiting how to do this, especially years in now. What's the best path forward? We have had anecdotals from students. I mean, we have data of the teachers that are showing the videos and engaging the students. I only have anecdotal student stories, one which was on the news, that I included in one of the board updates where the student credited Wellness Wednesday with saving her life because she knew who to talk to when she was suicidal. The data that we have really, because we push this out, districts push this out, not through a health class, it's required instruction that needs to fit somewhere, is really, did the teachers engage in the instruction? So that is part of our discussion is how do we know the return on investment student by student? And so that is part of our discussion now and trying to figure out the way forward so that we can also measure that.
Thank you. I just know the kids, they say, oh, it's just a waste, or, can we do something else? And I mean, they've made recommendations. So I don't know how we keep them engaged, but I just know there's somewhat of an issue. Yes. So I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
The other thing is regarding the mental health teams. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding, because it sounds like there's a team in every school, but really they're multi schools. These are teams that are instead of multitasking, they're multi-schooling. I mean, right? I mean, they're having to go to there's these teams that go to different schools. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So the school mental health team is, each school has their own team. Every school has their school counselor or school counselors. Each school has a social worker assigned to just those schools. Same with the psychologist, nurse, LMHP. So for that school, like Cape Coral High School, for example, they have their social worker, their LMHP, their school psychologist is theirs. They're not there 5 days a week, their school nurse either. They're there certain days a week. But they team collectively. They do a lot of communicating together. But the team meeting every week is really to make sure that we get everyone around the table from all those perspectives and talk about students. For example, when I was a counselor at Cape Coral High School, Sherry Wenzel was the social worker. Her office was one door down from me. And we kind of called it drive-by counseling because we'd catch each other in the hallway and I'd say, hey, I noticed so-and-so was in your office. Is everything okay? She would have context on my student about potential homelessness or becoming at risk for homelessness that I needed to know. But this gets us all around the table at one time to talk about all those pieces. So we have itinerant staff. In answer to your question, every school has their own itinerant in each area that they become a part of that school fabric. So yes, they are that school team. They're not teams that travel around, but the itinerants do have more than one school that they serve.
Thank you, because I knew all those positions that you mentioned, they weren't at each school filled and they're full-time. They had to be traveling around. So yes. I just wanted to make sure that people understand that because we're stretched thin. So thank you.
Yes. Any other comments? Dr. Carlin?
I would just like to respond to a couple of things, most importantly, the staffing around this. So you've heard me speak about teacher recruitment and retention. This also encompasses other employee groups, right? So we are going to have discussions. We are currently engaged in discussions at the cabinet level about how we effectively recruit and retain individuals Certainly, salary is always going to play a role. There's no question about it when we talk with teachers, when we talk with other team members. However, there's also the other parts that go with it, working conditions, culture. Is it attractive to come to the school district when, particularly in these areas, they can hang a shingle, they can hang up a sign and they can maybe double or triple what we're able to offer. So we really want to be looking at different ways that we can recruit and retain. And really what it goes to is, yes, salary, but also working conditions. And how do we make it attractive for people to come to the school district of Lee County? So we have some ideas coming on off of a campaign. You get lots of information. So I do have some ideas, and we'll be talking more about that in the coming months at Cabinet. Thank you.
All right, I just have a few quick comments. I applaud the results that you are seeing from the actions that you're taking regarding Wellness Wednesday, and I won't beat a drum, but while yes, we get quite a few complaints about it, I will say that in our elementary schools, they actually enjoy Wellness Wednesday a little more than they do in maybe our secondary schools. So there is something working there. But I think too, maybe whenever you all are coming to the table about how to revise this plan, I would encourage you to not just think of those high flyers. There are students that have high stress that aren't necessarily high flyers, and I'm sitting here thinking about my son and all of his friends, and there's the amount of stress they're under as, where do I go to college? Am I going to tech school? I mean, those are all things that can be that can have conversation during Wellness Wednesdays when we're thinking about our secondary. That can start as early as freshman year. Just how to deal with those stresses in life as they mature. So I feel like that could be part of the conversations and that they're having for Wellness Wednesday. I mean, some of our students are having to figure out at a very young age how to juggle work and school. That's a high stress, which I think can be tackled in this arena. So that's just my own 2 cents about that. I have a question though. Watching a Baker Act it'll keep you up at night, and I can't imagine how it feels as the parent. When those situations are happening on weekends, holidays, and summer breaks, how is that communicated to the school? I mean, it's probably not required for the parents to. Are you getting a report or anything? How are we managing those things that are happening outside of school that families are dealing with?
I'm glad you asked that question. We receive reports from all of our law enforcement agencies and also our mobile crisis team, Circuit 20, for any outside of school involuntary examinations under the Baker Act. When we receive those, we reach out to the school mental health team for each of those children, and they will call the parent and offer to follow up with a support plan at school, connect them to additional services. The ones that we do not know about are students who are sent to the hospital to be medically cleared. That's under HIPAA, and therefore our law enforcement partners would not necessarily be transporting because an ambulance may, or it may happen in the mental health counseling setting, a private or in agency counseling that's under HIPAA. We would not know unless the parent self-disclosed or the student. And then doctor's offices. So if it's law enforcement involved, we know. If it's mobile crisis team through Circuit 20, we know. Outside of that, we encourage parents to share with us, and sometimes students do. And there are times when we do find out through our law enforcement reports, we'll reach out to the parent and they're not happy that we know. We work hard to build relationships and to tell them we're just here to support. And so I think that has become more accepted in the past 7 years, since 2018. And so we do have that communication, and then we generally receive a positive response when we call the parent to develop a support plan at school when the child returns.
Okay, thank you. And just a tagline off of something Mr. Fisher said earlier about a PSA or some sort of a campaign throughout the district. I know that is so wonderful that these organizations are partnering with us, but I'm certain there are more. They just don't know that this is something that is a need. So I would encourage you to, reach out to Phi and Community Co-op, YMCA, I mean, multiple places, so. Any other comments, follow-up? Thank you so much for the hard work being put behind this. I appreciate you and the team. So,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. We're going to move on to proposed adjustment to school start times for 25-26 school year. Our presenters are Dave Newland, Dr. Nathan Shaker, and Jared McKinney this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon again, board members, Superintendent Dr. Denise Carlin, and School Board Attorney Kathy Dupree-Bruno. We are here today to discuss a proposed Safety Start initiative for the Transportation Department with a proposed new bus route tier system to start the 2025-2026 school year. And before we begin the presentation, again with me is Chief Academic Officer Nathan Shaker and Transportation Executive Director Jared McKinney. So why are we here? What is the need for the change? Some of the things we hear, one of the main issues we hear from the public is feedback about our busing system, are things as students getting to school late in the morning, getting picked up late at the end of the day at school, which causes students to get home late. This is a safety concern. This creates a hardship for everyone, the parents, students, and staff. As a safety is a priority, we don't want students waiting at the bus stop for an extended period of time. A lot of times with both parents working, it creates a hardship with delayed bus routes, their child not being picked up on time, and or getting home late. Parents usually have a very regimented schedule. Any deviation can create a hardship or stress on the family. So what if I told you today that we have a solution to this, and that's why we're here?
Then we would be happy.
So again, the rationale for the change, we want to enhance safety and security. We want to improve student achievement. We respond to public feedback. We want to increase operational efficiency, and we also want to be fiscally responsible.
So currently, this is our tier system. In the morning, we're dropping off at 7:05 a.m. There's high schools getting out at 1:35. And as you can see, between tiers 1 and 2, there's only a 25-minute deficit there. That does not provide enough time in the afternoons between dismissal, for dismissal time on the ramps, and for our drivers to actually drop students off and make it to the next tier. So with this time being so compressed right now, we're setting our drivers up for failure at the beginning of the day, every single day. So what we're asking is to create more time between the tiers, which we'll get to. But right now, there's only an hour between tier 2 and 3, but we don't factor in the time for dismissal that it takes to get off the ramps from the buses. So with that time being so compressed, we are setting our drivers up for failure, like I said, late every single day. And right now, we started with a deficit of 67 drivers every morning. That's before any absences take place, and that's why we're so late everywhere. So that's why we're kind of coming to this tier system.
So as mentioned before, our current tier system, the tiers are too compressed to pick up students and drop off students consistently. Also, the current routes are inefficient due to staffing time and constraints. So with our new tier system, this provides a safer, more consistent route. And again, it designs to support the improved academic achievement as well. If you look at it again, one of the things too I want to bring up too is the proximity, when that was put into place, that was a very tremendous help to this busing and transportation system. But again, remember, the other part that we're talking about today is the restructuring of the tiers, which is kind of that mechanism of making sure that that works out as well because of being too close together. We're looking at routes, how close they are between one to the other, giving the drivers enough time to complete those routes on time. So what I have here, what you're looking at now is a transportation route system. This is your on-time data. If you look at the orange bar, now this is a average of all the different transportation within our district as well. So the orange bar is your AM arrival time of the students that arrive on school on time. The blue bar is your PM pickup time, of students being picked up at school on time. So if you look at the orange bar, right now as an average, we're maintaining an 82.75% average being on time in the AM. However, for the PM pickup time, we are at 59.5%. So we have some work to do to improve those times.
So going back to that tier system that Dave just showed you, right now, currently, we're budgeted for 580 positions for drivers. We actually carry 517 at the moment. We have no UARs, which would be our unassigned drivers that we have on our books. But because we don't have positions filled, we don't have sub-drivers sitting around like that. So, and we currently make 5,721 bus stops daily. Making how many routes is 1177. Driving the 9 million miles annually. So we do not have a sub pool, and maintaining that average is not acceptable to us. So what we want to do is, when this conversation started, is create achievable goals for our employees. And doing so and creating this new tier system will help us step in the right direction getting there, which leads to the next one. So with our new system, we'll only, and I want to make sure I make it clear that we're not saying that we don't want the message to be misconstrued that we don't need drivers, because we do. This is not to decrease the need for them. This is to create more efficiency for us to maintain a better on-time average every day. So under this new tier system, we'll maintain 520 drivers. We'll have 500 routes actually, which will give us a time to have 20 UARs, which will be 5 at each compound, putting us in the positive every day. And we'll still make the same amount of bus stops, but it creates more time in between for us to actually make it.
So if you look at our new proposed system, this is a proposed 3-tier transportation system program we are proposing to you. This way it sets up the drivers to have more time in between, not only to get their route on time, to get students to school on time, but also gives enough time if needed to take a break. And also we have taken consideration some of the things we can't control. We can't control traffic. Right now with traffic, Lee County right now, at one point it was seasonal, now it's year-round. So we have to make sure that we have to take that into account when we adjust these schedules with each route, that we give that into consideration, giving the drivers time to get from A to B on time, taking consideration the times when traffic is really congested. Also, with the driver trying to get there, it creates stress. There is a propensity to increase traffic crashes because you're dealing with a lot of traffic, trying to get students to school on time and home on time. And also, again, it could increase traffic violations as well, too, because they're trying to achieve that goal of getting kids to school on time and home on time. So as a reminder, safety is our priority, but not only for the students, but also for our drivers as well. That's why it's so important. So if you look at the Tier 1, for example, you'll see that we have an approximate 466 routes for Tier 1. Now, this includes our high schools. We haven't broken them down to show how many routes per high school, 399. We have our K-8 schools at 49 routes, and then Skyline Elementary at 18. So why have you arranged it this way? Well, number one, like I mentioned before, we were given a time between Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 to finish those routes to get to the next one. However, the K-8 schools we talked about with staff, and we got a big group together with different departments kind of discussing the strategy was the best way to arrange this. And with K-8 schools, then we have elementary. We don't want elementary school down in Tier 3 being that late in the day in school. Also, we look at, for Skyline Elementary, for example, why is Skyline Elementary there? Well, because if you look at where Skyline Elementary is currently located, it's right next to Patriot. So you think about two schools at the same time, traffic coming in and out, buses coming in and out, it can create a very bad traffic problem. So we had to look at this look at these reasons, fix these problems so it doesn't become a future problem. So by looking at this, and you go to Tier 2 and Tier 3, the routes go down. They minimize as you go through this, which means that gives our drivers availability to meet those goals for Tier 2 and Tier 3. So look at Tier 2, we have our elementary schools, we have our YPEP, and for the audience, that's Youth Parent Education Program. our ECC, which is our Early Childhood Learning Center. So we have those programs for our Tier 2, which goes down to 411 routes. Again, it's approximate, and I'll reiterate this, why approximate? Because stops can change, stops can be taken away, they can be added, it depends. So that's why we have approximate, this can change. Tier 3 goes down to 300 routes as an approximate route. That's your middle schools, includes Buckingham, Royal Palm, and Success Academy. So we feel with these routing system, the way we have it divided up in the times, that'll give drivers the success to meet the goal of getting the kids to school on time, getting them home on time, and make the next tier, whether go to Tier 2 or Tier 3. So by, again, this proposal, this is going to give less time for students waiting at bus stops unattended. Again, safety is priority. So we don't want students sitting in the bus stop longer than they have to. This is going to reduce hardships for parents and staff. This will improve driver route efficiency and obviously improve fleet maintenance as well.
There will absolutely be an academic impact on the move as well. With the additional time, with the reliable drop-offs and pickups, we can start looking at adding student instructional minutes, which is something we've wanted to do for years in order to kind of get in line with our peers. Collier right now runs a 49-minute period. Charlotte runs a 50-minute period. We are at a 47-minute period. With this increased efficiency, knowing our students will be there, we can absolutely start running a 49-minute instructional period in both middle and high school. And with elementary, we'll have an additional 25 minutes of instruction that we can factor in there. This includes time for a 30-minute lunch for our staff and for our students, which is something that working with TALC and working with SPALC has been something that a partnership that we've been working on for a while. I can say timely drop-off and pickup results in increased time efficiency in the school day. When students are not arriving late, when parents are not concerned about the lack of a bus and picking up early, it overall just allows us to use our instructional time much more efficiently. Consistency, additional positive impacts, consistency of on-time student arrival, increase access to breakfast service. This will have an impact on food service. Decrease negative student behaviors, it impacts student services, decrease in a disruption to the learning environment, that goes straight to academic services. As Dave had mentioned, also increasing the stability of driver and routes performance. This reduces driver fatigue, which factors into human resources. It's going to decrease bus accidents, increase on-time arrivals for routes. We really feel like the increased efficiency of this system is going to have a number of major effects. To that end, we absolutely welcome any superintendent and board comments on this proposed change to our schedule.
First of all, thank you to our team for bringing this proposal forward. So one of the challenges that I've given our team is to think differently, to start looking at some of the challenges and taking them head on, and to be bold and to be brave and to be courageous. And what I mean by that is on behalf of children, on behalf of student learning, on behalf of safety. We have an opportunity here, and I am really excited about this proposal. All the things that are on the agenda, obviously mental health is important, all of that, but very excited about this for a number of reasons. One, we continue to struggle with hiring bus drivers, and we are working really hard to try to put some things in terms of retention, strategies in play. We've heard our drivers, we understand, we've listened for many years now, because this is not my first time at the rodeo, right? I've had opportunities to talk with drivers on the campaign trail. I've had opportunities to go actually out to the compounds when I was previously employed by the district, serving breakfast at Christmas time, or going out and we had a big meeting. Miss Jordan, you remember, we were all there and we listened to the concerns. This is an opportunity to address a number of those concerns. Student achievement, I'm real passionate, as you are, about that. When we get to add instructional minutes to a day, and I've shared this with you privately and I'll share it with the public out loud, of all of the things we do in our instructional environment, a high quality teacher and more time are really the only two variables that we can control that impact student achievement. More time, high quality teachers. That's why you hear me speak so passionately about this proposal, and you will continue to hear it. It allows our teachers to have more time, our children more time to be instructed, and very importantly, going to teacher and driver recruitment and retention. So for all of those reasons, yes, we will have a small adjustment in some start times, but I think the little bit of pain is worth the tremendous return on investment that we know we will see in all of those areas. So we are excited to bring this for you to today. We can't wait to hear what you have to say, and we look forward to your comments.
I'm going to go to Ms. Shaviano and then Mr. Ribble.
Thank you guys for putting this together. I had questions on 2 slides. So slide 9 with the tier breakdown for Skyline versus, I guess, Patriot from tier 1 to tier 2. So 50 minutes is basically the difference. So that's going to be enough time, we think, not to have a traffic issue. Because I know in the morning, our parents are just eager to drop our kids off, and those lines are like ridiculously long and wrapped around the building. So just making sure with like traffic and kind of those eager parents to get in line, that's going to be enough of a gap for them.
So yes, because you have one going one way and another coming in. So that definitely won't be a problem. That's why we separated those two. So absolutely, that's being addressed.
Okay, because that, it's not pretty sometimes, yes. Okay, and then slide 11, in regards to adding 25 minutes for elementary, does that bring them up to 49 minutes to kind of keep them in line for instruction?
So the elementary number of instructional minutes isn't necessarily dictated by state statute.
Right.
At the high school level and the middle school level, 47 minutes is really the bare minimum of instructional minutes that we can have. What it's going to do is provide us time in the day to do more intervention, to do more instruction, to expand a math or a reading block. And we can fit it into this tiered system.
Right. Yeah, so again, when we're looking at adding time, I'm all for adding more time for elementary specific, because obviously that's their foundational and kind of critical learning time.
Yeah.
Early from like, first to third grade, it's kind of the benchmark we're looking at specifically for third. So anything we can do to add more learning minutes, I am all for. And obviously getting our teacher more time to actually have a lunch break, I think would be great. They'd appreciate that. So yeah, no, I think that's all good. Thank you so much.
Mr. Ribble?
Yes, Mr. Nolan, you went over, gave me a flavor in our head-to-head about this, or our one-on-ones, if you will, and I was impressed. Now I really got into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, but certainly having a need for 60 less routes, we got to applaud the plan. The whole plan looks great to me. In the industry, we call it loop dispatch, but here we're moving children around instead of packages. I just have one question. Are you folks covered this with the drivers? Have they bought into the plan? Because I think that's half the battle.
Well, that's the next phase. This is the first phase to present it to you all, and then we'll start releasing it out and having conversations.
Great.
So I can almost wholeheartedly say, being in transportation so long, I believe they'll buy it. It's a great plan, and again, it gives them achievable goals. Like, our drivers really do want to be on time. They don't enjoy, having to rush, having no downtime, having to do all these extra things that they don't have time for. So I can absolutely see them loving this.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Fisher, Ms. Giovanelli next.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carlin and staff, for bringing this forward. Obviously, the district, we're not where we need to be with academic performance, and things like this will truly make a difference. I appreciate that. 2 questions I have. First is from the teacher administrator standpoint. When you're looking at these schedules, I know it's kind of, obviously still experimenting with where you're at with it. When it comes to teacher planning and PLCs and those things, are there any impacts one way or the other to those?
We'll make the daily schedule a little bit tighter. We're looking at bell schedules that have 10 to 15 minutes at the start of the day as dedicated teacher planning time. Obviously, their planning period will then be increased by 2 minutes, which will make the contractually required 40 minutes of continuous planning there. We'll meet the 60-minute requirement. Ideally, at the end, we are going to have additional time where teachers have a little bit of contractual time to get together and work, because we will be picking up kids in a more timely fashion. We can have a bus ramp loaded with all of the buses that need to take the kids, load those in at the end of the day and have them off campus in 10 minutes. Right now, we do a lot of holding our students for a fair amount of time after school, which is going to cut in not only to teacher contractual time as they supervise, but also beyond contractual time.
Okay, thank you. Next question I have, in regards to, many of us went through proximity, obviously, and the changes, especially the parent pickup lines. Do we imagine, outside of Skyline, Patriot, and Challenger, I know with even proximity, there was always issues just how, close some of the schools in Cape Coral built near each other. But in regards to parent pickup, do we see any changes one way or other at the moment? I know that's very hard to anticipate, as well as we're, a year in on 2 years in elementary and the first year into middle school proximity.
Right now, the only issue was the Skyline. The other ones, we don't anticipate any issues, but we'll keep it on the table. It's always an option, and if things of that nature come up, then we can adjust then.
Any other comments? Oh, Ms. Giovanelli?
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Fisher stole one of my questions, was the first one, but regarding the impact of teachers. So I'll just add to that, or ask the question. So in reporting, that's going to adjust the teachers or staff schedule somewhat, a little bit, right? They'll either work a little longer, or they'll come in a little later in the morning now? I mean, or does that change, not change? That's what I was curious.
The teacher workday will still be 7.5 hours, which is what it has been.
Okay.
Really, we're going to be in front of students more during that time. We're going to have less time without students during the day.
Okay, great. And that's it. Thank you. I'm excited about it, by the way. I mean, I think this is long overdue, so thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
Yeah, I'm excited too. They've asked most of my questions as well, but the only other question that I would have, and it probably has nothing to do with you all, it's dropping these kids off. We're talking about dropping them off, but we're talking about the kids who are not being dropped off, and where are they going when the time changes? Are we having before care for the schools? That would be my question, because a lot of parents are at work by 8 o'clock. And so at 8:30, where are those kids at for those 30 minutes?
And I can say that just this morning, I was on a meeting looking at the before and after care programs. They've grown pretty robust with proximity. It was a requirement going out that we created programs when proximity took place. So I don't anticipate it having a huge impact. What we may have is a change in the way that we price it. So for a school that opens up their before care at 6:30 in the morning, but their kids were starting at 7:55, they would charge a lower price than what would be charged in the afternoon. We would just invert those if the start time was now 8:30 and there was more childcare taking place in the morning and less in the afternoon. Did I explain that?
Well, yeah, and I would just hope that we really look at that, because I know right now there are several schools who don't even have the capability, even though they have two different forms of before care and after, there's just not enough space for other children. So these kids are now, the latchkey kids, or I don't know where the parents are dropping them. But I just want to really make sure that we're aware of that.
Absolutely. And I know Thursday we look forward to sharing more in depth with our principals. We've had some great focus groups, but our principals are going to have some great input to give us on Thursday.
Well, I appreciate this. Thank you.
What is your anticipated timeline? I mean, this plan's so good, I'd like to see it start tomorrow, but unfortunately, it can't start that way. But do y'all have any kind of a timeline to implement, or are you just thinking next year? I mean,
Our plan is to start this next year, the 25-26 school year. To get this in place, obviously give parents a time, even when the enrollment starts out as well, to plan that ahead of time for the year.
The only thing I would add is to piggyback off that comment is, school choice is coming up. And obviously, the sooner the better with this plan, so that parents can start to make some decisions. I think it's great. I'm like you. I'm like, I don't know why we're waiting, but I mean, I do know why we're waiting. But I think that the fact that we will have cushion of unassigned drivers, that has to help the transportation department. Do you all ever run, this is a question, I spent 6 years on the bus ramp. I had a great tan lines.
It's a rite of passage. We all did it.
And it's something we would always discuss out there is, do you all ever run like pseudo transportation route before school even gets started, before day one. Like if a bus stop takes you 3 minutes approximately to load kids, do you all run anything like that before the school year starts to see if something like this really works? Like it looks great on paper.
Yes, actually, we actually created a simulation for this progress, before this plan. So absolutely, we do. We create the routes first.
Okay.
And it gives you the approximate time, and it's pretty accurate. But only thing is, it does not factor in the additional traffic.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
but other than that, it's pretty good to the T.
Okay, all right, terrific. Well, thank you. I appreciate the hard work. I can't wait to see it put to play. Anything else? All right, have a great afternoon.
thank you.
Moving on, legislative priorities. Looking forward to hearing from Christina Houlihan and Riley Kempton this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Dr. Carlin and board members. Riley and I are here today to give you a brief overview of our 2025 legislative priorities for this upcoming session. And to just provide you all and also the public with some background information on how these priorities were formed, our lobbyist Kim McDougall with Gray Robinson met with each of you individually and heard each of your individual priorities that you wanted to be brought forward. They then brought that information back to us, and then we brought that information to our cabinet members, and we refined it a little bit to see their actual needs that meet with your priorities as well. And then, so that is how we formed the priorities that are before you today. And this is the information that we will share with the public on our website, and then also the legislators whenever we are in Tallahassee. First on our list of priorities is administrative efficiency. For administrative efficiency, we will be supporting and advocating for legislation that reduces the red tape and unnecessary regulations, allowing the school district to innovate and compete, operate more efficiently, and maintain cost effectiveness. This covers a multitude of policies that will help streamline processes and regulations to make it easier for teachers to do their jobs, the district to operate more efficiently, and ultimately enhancing educational opportunities and outcomes for the students. Next on our list, we have increased student achievement, which includes supporting the increase of per student funding by at least 5%. So that'll take us from $8,959 in financial year 2025 to $9,431 in financial year 2026. This is a pretty standard ask, and this will help as prices increase for us to also match that with increasing our per student funding. Additionally, we are also requesting a specific appropriation of $2.5 million for the advancement of a career and technical education college community partnership in the East Zone of Lee County. This is a continuation of our request from last year for the East Zone Technical College, which we will pursue in collaboration with community partners and local businesses. Our goal is to ensure that students are job ready upon graduation and remain in Lee County. Our goal is also to fulfill the critical workforce gaps in businesses that are in urgent need of skilled tradespeople. Lastly, we are asking to allow districts to establish school start times based on the input from parents and families with students attending district schools. And just to clarify, this is different than the presentation you all just heard. But we did send out a survey to both our parents and to our teachers, and just a quick update, which we got just before this presentation. We have received 1,624 responses from staff, and then 4,437 from parents, and that's been out for about 2.5 weeks, and we plan to push another send of that, and then keep it open for another 2 weeks, and then that is the information that we will bring to Tallahassee with us to legislators.
And what we can go ahead and do is before we do that next push, before we go to Tallahassee next week, we can also give you guys kind of the high-level overview of what that kind of looks like. But we do want as much feedback as possible. That's why we're going to extend it out the additional 2 weeks. The following student achievement, priority we have is safety priorities. And this, we are supporting an increase of the Safe Schools allocation in the Florida Education Finance Program to ensure funds are available for student safety initiatives. Also, we are supporting the recommendations of the school safety officers, guardian, and law enforcement officers to address any unintended consequences from the implementation of House Bill 1473. That was the school safety bill last year. That was passed during 2024. With this, we are also requesting a specific appropriation of $5 million for school safety for upgrading critical security systems and hardening of school facilities. This $5 million will help continue the advancement of current practices and to implement new cutting-edge practices in the field that will enhance our safety measures. Along with some of the feedback from House Bill 1473 that was passed last year, we are also watching other key pieces of legislation that has been filed and looping in Chief Newland as well as to how that would directly impact our district if it were to pass.
Next on our priorities list, we have teacher certification and retention. And this, the first one that we have listed here, this is a continuation of us asking from the past 2 years, but we're hoping we'll get it across the finish line this session, which is amending Florida statute to exclude school social workers from the instructional staff that must take and pass the professional education exam, Florida Teacher Certification Examination, to maintain employment in a public school. This is just a costly and excessive regulation that we have on our social workers, and by removing that, we'll be able to recruit more social workers. And then also, we're asking, supporting the streamlining of the requirements for individuals who want to renew their teaching certificate but are not currently employed by a Florida school district. Currently, teacher certifications are tied to the district in which they work for, and whenever they leave the profession but might want to come back, it is both costly to them and there is no mechanism that allows them to pause their certification unless they are going to leave for a private institution. We're asking that that just be extended to all teachers, and that will make it also easier for us to recruit qualified teachers.
Next, we have our financial initiatives. The first one is to ensure that funding follows the student in real time, and we requested that the Department of Education to issue an RFI, request for information, to identify potential solutions for real-time student and financial tracking. This came up of a concern as Florida is leading the way with school choice. We just want to make sure that we are keeping track of where the dollars are going based off of where the students are in real time. Second, we are requesting an increase in the mental health allocation to better address the growing needs of students and staff. Increasing our mental health allocation is a crucial ask, and by increasing these funds, we may better equip our mental health professionals with the tools they need to support our students. This will also significantly enhance the students' well-being and academic performance. Lastly, we are supporting the funding of the High Growth District Capital Outlay Assistance Grant Program for districts with a 5-year average of increasing student enrollment. This would help districts manage significant growth by funding the construction and additional schools to address ongoing overcrowding issues. As you know, we are growing and we are growing fast, and it's not slowing down. And we're asking the legislature to both fund the grant for the school districts that are high growth and also to award that grant to the Lee County School District to help with the construction costs of these new facilities.
And last but certainly not least, we are asking to include all kindergarten classes and programs in the Department of Education's Florida Inventory of Schoolhouses calculations to ensure that all students receiving instruction in Florida school districts are accurately counted for and receive adequate funding from the DOE. Essentially, our pre-K kids right now are not included in our per student funding, but we are both housing and instructing them. So we're just asking that they be included in that calculation so that we can ensure that we're receiving the funds for those kids.
And with that high-level overview, we welcome any superintendent and board member comments.
So this is our first opportunity to really highlight our dynamic duo here. So we are really fortunate to have Ms. Houlihan and Ms. Kempton join our team. As you can see, and as you will see next week in Tallahassee, they are very familiar with these processes and will be guiding us along with Kim McDougall through the Tallahassee maze and the opportunities that await us as we advocate strongly for our children and for policy changes that are going to positively impact not only student achievement, but all of our other priorities as well. So we welcome your conversation and look forward to your feedback.
Board members, any comments or questions? Mr. Persons and Mr. Fisher.
On the school social workers, if you could get some information before we go up there on, number one, how many we have maybe lost because they could not pass the teacher's exam. I know there were a few last time. I don't know what the figures are over the last few years. You know, it's obvious that it makes it difficult to recruit new ones because they don't even want to take it. And they do not teach. That's for the public to know.
Right.
You know, they're not teachers. I think maybe in past years, decades ago or something, they taught and were social workers both. But I know in our district that's not the case.
We can certainly get those numbers for you, and we did meet with Paul in the social work department, and he said this would be crucial for him to get more social workers in there.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. I have a question. Actually, no, I see it in here. So I want to thank you both in the short amount of time, the hard work that you both have put in, how much you've elevated government relations. So I'm excited to have you both. Thank you for your hard work. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Giovanelli?
I'm excited to see how we all work together next week. So I think it's going to be great. I'm just excited about that opportunity. I actually, there's a couple of these I just like love. I'm hoping that we can get these through to the finish line. So I'm excited. So I am curious. Have y'all reached out and what FSBA's, what they're going after? Because I know obviously we do different because this is for Lee County. So I'm just curious anything that's kind of similar.
Quite a few of these policy initiatives actually mirror FSBA's as well. When we were in Tampa for the conference, we met with a lot of their legislative folks, and they were fantastic with briefing us on all of this. So it's going to be fun because we're not going to be the only school district really trying to push a lot of these initiatives, which is a good thing.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, ladies, for the hard work. We look forward to seeing your work in Tallahassee.
Thank you.
The next presentation, which is our last presentation, is institutional board member seats presented by Dr. Ken Savage.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Garland and board members. So today I'm here just really more to help facilitate your annual activity of designating which board members sit in which liaison seats. As per the board manual, as well as per our policies, we have a document here to kind of guide that work. We did have a recommendation as it pertained to some of the current board advisories that certainly you can have any more follow-up conversation if you'd like to do that as well. That is embedded into the agenda item, but the rest of it here is just we have basically board discussion to make sure that you all have the opportunity to put the proper liaison for the different institutional seats that remain. The ones that we presently have already identified based on the FSBA, for example, is Ms. Langford Fleming as the FSBA Advocacy Committee term, with Ms. Jordan as the alternate, with Mr. Fisher as on the FSBA Board of Directors for that 2-year term, with Ms. Jordan as the alternate. We also had Mr. Ribble this was a newly requested institutional liaison seat with Florida Gulf Coast University, and so that again information is brought forward. All of these things are something that you all as a group collectively get to decide. Historically in the past, it has not required any type of formal process, but more just conversation. So with that said, I know some of our board members who are experienced in this effort through numerous different board terms If you'd have anything you'd want to add, I'd turn it back to you, Vice Chair, as you run the meeting. It's totally up to you for any conversation. I'm here to assist.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. So in the past, I know that we had open discussion in an orderly fashion on who would serve on what committees, for those of you who are new to the board. So I am happy to open up for discussion if we want to start where, if there's any particular interest in a specific role here, somebody that's wanted to serve on a committee that they haven't, or continue to serve one more term. So we can just have open discussion, if you will. Ms. Jordan, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Well, I've served on every one of these, with the exception of DAC. And so I am willing to serve on any of them, but I've subbed DAC, but I've never actually sat on that.
And just for clarification, for some of you newer board members, you're welcome to come to any committee meeting that you want. We're just asking for your attendance as much as you can if you're actually the liaison. So I just wanted to clear that up. You're not, it doesn't exclude you from going to any meetings, so.
And maybe perhaps, Ms. Fleming too, where this says convene, how they have the other board, the other advisory committees, and then it says ad hoc as needed. I think maybe that needs to be, I know we had a conversation on that, but how would one be the representative or the liaison to the as needed? Because then they would just be notified, we need you now, and so if maybe that needs to be explained as well.
That's a great point, and I can help clarify. So our recommendation, again, that can be undone. It really is just a recommendation. Our job is to make recommendations to the board, to give you the rationale for that. You as a board, though, these are your advisory committees in that top section. And so right now, because our current recommendation was to allow them to live within the DAC, there would only be one board liaison seat because these others would only be convened in an ad hoc basis. So that would basically be only as needed. So if there were a particular construction item, if there were, a desire on the part of the board to say, I would like a special ad hoc committee formed within DAC to address a particular issue, such as like a proximity plan, something to that effect, a strategic plan. It could be any of the elements that you would want that would then live within that piece. So there would not be a board liaison beyond the DAC liaison. However, as Ms. Jordan and as Ms. Langford-Flynn mentioned, all board members are invited to attend and listen. This just officially allows one board member as a representative of the board to be the liaison, to basically carry information back and forth between the board. So that's why these ones are blocked out. We could very easily open them back up again if the board were to say they did not want to follow through with that recommendation, wanted to stay within the existing structure in any way.
And if I may, if I could just add one piece to that. Thank you, Dr. Savage. Part of your question, I think, Ms. Jordan, was regarding how we would do that. So just as Dr. Savage said, if there was perhaps a new school, being constructed and there were issues, or we would want input, maybe on construction contracts or something to that degree, we could make a decision. Do we want to run that by the entire DAC, or are we looking for maybe a group, a subgroup to pull off, just like you would do with any ad hoc committee of any group, and say, okay, we're going to be looking for some specific feedback around this particular issue. Strategic plan is a great example of that as well. Those of you that might have some interest in helping us with the strategic plan, we're re-upping on it. We need to refine maybe some of our goals or strategies or run something by you. Those of you that are interested, we would pull that together as an ad hoc committee. So if you serve as the liaison, our anticipation would be that we would join you at one of those meetings and say, this is what we're going to be looking for, and throw that open to the entire DAC. So then people that were interested or available or that type of thing then could join us. So it'd be more ad hoc of the nature.
Correct. No, I understood that part, but are we looking to assign people for those as needed positions at this meeting, and then the standing committee meeting as well, which is EDAC, which is the standing one of that? Are we looking to put someone, so if you have the need for strategic plan, okay, it's Mr. Ribble, that's you. So he would then be that person that would go to that meeting or whomever here. We just assign it at that time?
The
Or they just
intention,
don't exist?
if I may, the intention was the DAC is the larger advisory
it.
committee.
Okay.
There is one board member as the liaison to that to communicate back and forth. Again, you're all welcome to sit there, listen to
Gotcha.
conversations, but just the one. And that person would essentially carry the water from the board between the two, the direction from the board to the committee and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
So if there is anyone besides Ms. Jordan that would want to serve on the DAC, are we okay to go ahead and start adding names to lists? Dr. Savage, are you ready for that?
Happy to do that.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
So I'm just bringing up DAC, and this is kind of a little bit off topic for a second, because in our ethics training that we had, I sent this to the board attorney, there was, and I can't forget which video, but they talked about subcommittees. And what DAC does is they meet all together on Zoom, and then they break out into these subcommittees, which does not allow for the public to be able to go to both subcommittees. So that, from the video that I was understanding, that was a violation of sunshine, because not everybody can see that and hear those conversations that are happening in these subcommittees. If you could clarify that.
Through the chair, if I may. So you're correct, Ms. Giovanelli. The subcommittees that are part of these board advisory committees are supposed to abide by the sunshine law. So a couple of years ago, what we did was to notice those subcommittee meetings separately, so that there was a time certain when they were going to commence, minutes would be taken, and they would be open to the public. Now, starting this year, it's much different, where they're not going to be using as much in terms of the subcommittees, because the subcommittees were elementary, middle, and high school. Now we have the zones that are all mixed in together, so I don't believe they're going to be using that format as much. But if they do have to break out to subcommittees, they will then follow the same procedure, notice it properly, take minutes, and make sure it's open to the public.
So the video that I watched, they didn't recommend that. And so I'm just bringing that out there. And I mean, that was our ethics training regarding sunshine, and they didn't recommend that at all. In fact, they recommend, because they said even if 2 board members are in, because that happened, because the last meeting, there was a glitch and a problem with with the Zoom or Teams, I forget which one it was, and not everybody was able to even get in. Then they were out. So then everybody was down, and nobody was, and then when you got back in, it was complicated. So I'm concerned.
And I think I can put a little clarification. I think you're talking about breakout rooms and so forth, that the way the DAC issued in breakout rooms. I think that is one of the issues, that there is an awareness of when you utilize breakout rooms where they're all segregated, where they have the ability to have separate conversations, that an attending public could only hear one of them, couldn't hear others, there's no record. That's I think the specific matter of interest that you're referring to, Ms. Giovanni, is that correct? And so I think that's any type of subcommittee type of structure would have to operate not as a breakout capacity to avoid that very matter, whether that meant separate minutes. Essentially, it's falling within the larger DAC structure, but it is that has more to do with how you comprise membership, how you have nomination procedures, all those different things to kind of element those aspects of it. In terms of the sunshine, the desire would be that it is conducted within full compliance of sunshine law, minutes, so forth, structure, all those things to support that.
You're missing the point. The point was that public could not be in all 3 breakout rooms, which were going on at the same time. And that is, I'm telling you, that is what's happened. I just got off of DAC, or I'm getting off of DAC, I'm sure. And that went on for over 12 months. Of the ability that it did not allow the public to go in all 3 breakout rooms. It only allowed them to be in one. It only allowed me to be in one.
I'm sorry, I wasn't being clear. I understand exactly what you're saying. And what I'm saying is that's not what this structure is. This structure is not designed to be breakouts for that particular piece. That's not the intention of it. That was trying to explain. I just didn't do a very good job. The breakout structure that you talked about within DAC, that was, as Attorney Bruno mentioned, one larger meeting. They then break into separate, distinct breakout groups that were, and they attend their meetings virtually. Essentially, that allowed for a person not to be able to participate in each of those things. This structure of what we're talking about is not that. We're not recommending that we move to a breakout capacity where the group is meeting about a larger topic, and then this particular group goes and segregates during that same time period. That's not what would be advised. This is a subcommittee within the DAC structure. So it's joint membership. It's members of DAC who could also be a member of a subcommittee meeting at a separate and distinct time, and so forth. And so that's the intention there.
Okay, now I got you.
And that's what I meant when I said that it has to be properly noticed for a specific time to be able to meet, and then minutes taken and open to the public. So I do know what you're talking about, because it was a problem, there was a lot of discussion about it and some pushback when we were trying to fix it, but now I don't believe it's going to be like that anymore. I mean, we're not doing that same type of breakout. It has to be properly noticed. If that makes sense.
But
it's a separate meeting. In other words, we're distinguishing it as a separate meeting, not a continuation of the prior meeting. They meet, at least this is how they were instructed to do it. So I wasn't at every meeting, but this is how they were instructed to do it. They'll say, in their notice at 1 p.m., we're going to have the subcommittee meeting for elementary school. They start their meeting, they close out their meeting, and then they say, we will rejoin this particular meeting. So it's a completely separate subcommittee meeting.
Yes, but they're giving recommendations. They were giving clear recommendations back to the district. One was just done recently regarding the time. And so I could not attend every one, and they were done at the same time. So I could not attend all of them. A couple times I would pop in one and pop in another, but the whole point being is that if the public starts at DAC and then they go into these breakout sessions, they're done at the same time. There's no way that individual public person could go into all three of them. It's not possible.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that a little bit more.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the DAC is the big umbrella of the other committees that we had chosen, what was it, last meeting or the meeting before, to blend these together. And then if within that DAC there needs to be committees we are discouraging, the DAC should be discouraging breakout sessions during that time slot. Let's say if they meet on Wednesdays from 5 to 7, they should all be in the same room from 5 to 7 meeting. If they feel as though there should be a breakout session, meaning like the new school start times perhaps needs its own subcommittee, then that subcommittee would form. They would meet on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 as the subcommittee for the, am I understanding you, Dr. Savage?
That's correct. Whenever they would need to meet, with whatever frequency they would need to meet, that would be properly noticed.
Okay.
Keep going, Jada. Keep going.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because we're doing so well, and I'm like, we need to continue to put people in the committees. Ms. Shapiano, and then we're going to go ahead and move on.
Oh, I'm just signing up for committees.
Okay, so I want to go back to DAC, though, so that we can make sure we're clear here, that Ms. Jordan would like to serve as a liaison on the DAC committee. Should they need a subcommittee, as the liaison, I would imagine, would bring back to the board, they're looking for a subcommittee for XYZ. Is that clear? Am I being clear?
I understand.
Okay, great.
But I do understand what she was saying, because I watched it, I witnessed it.
Yep.
So, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so moving down the list, the audit committee, Mr. Persons has been serving on. That is a committee that we are going to continue to have. Is there anyone that is interested in serving on the audit committee? Especially since we're going to be...
I've never served on the audit committee, so I would love the opportunity.
Okay.
That's good.
You're retired.
I'm retired. I like
that. And then the ISOC committee, I have no problem serving on that again, unless somebody else is interested in that. Let's discuss the surtax. Okay. Moving on. Are you keeping notes, Dr. Savage?
I'm writing it
Because
down.
I'm also doing it.
It's live. I'm doing it in real time, absolutely.
Okay, Early Head Start Policy Council, they do meet once a month. The last time I had served on this, they had discussed going bi-monthly. Ms. Morgan's not here any longer, so I'm not sure if that's the case, but I know that it's important that we keep tabs on how often these meetings are occurring, because I know we all have outside responsibilities also, so just wanted to point that out. Is there anyone that would be willing to serve on the Head Start program committee?
I've been on that.
It's a mid-morning meeting. Okay, we'll go back to that. We'll
I'll
keep.
serve on it. I don't have a problem.
Okay. Value Adjustment Board meets twice a year. Yes,
You and I have already been appointed to that.
that's
for
right.
next
That's
year.
the one that the chair and the vice, thank you. School Health Advisory Committee. I don't mind at all serving on that again.
It's good.
Okay. Dr. Savage, you can put down Board
Gotcha.
Member Fleming, thank you.
Okay.
Horizon Council is served by the chair and the vice as an alternate. Instructional calendar. Ms. Shaviano?
Yep.
Yes? Insurance Task Force. I know that Ms. Patrick always talked highly of this, so, okay, great. Mr. Ribble? The foundation board will be served by the chair and the vice chair as an alternate, so we can move down to FSBA Advocacy Committee.
Oops. Ma'am, I think we missed the Coalition for Drug-Free Southwest Florida, I think was the
Yep.
important one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one. We'll go back to drug-free really quick so Mr. Fisher has served on that for the last 2 years, so is anybody willing to?
It's a great committee. I'm happy if someone else wants to do it. It really gives you good perspective, especially on some of the mental health issues even we talked about today.
Anybody willing to serve in Mr. Fisher's place? Do you want to stay on that board?
Yeah. If nobody else will do it, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Mr. Fisher is not retired from that board. He's going to stay there. Now let's go down to the FSBA Advocacy Committee. Ms. Jordan, you currently
Okay,
serve.
well, yes, so that position is closed until May. May is when we need to start looking for new people to sit on that.
Okay.
Because they need to have that information. That runs from July 1 to June 30th of each year. And then, so May is when they would like for us to start thinking about it and send it forward. It's a one-year term.
Okay. So we can put a notation in there, maybe Dr. Savage, about addressing that. Could we possibly talk about that in our one-on-ones once it gets closer to May, just to see who is interested?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
And then if I may also, so Drug-Free Coalition, that's open to anybody. Anybody in Lee County can go to that. So it's never closed to any of those. And that goes with the other, and I know Dr. Savage and I spoke about this morning. And that's the same with the other, the ones below as well, the Learning for Life. I know that's really, they have our kids, they use our kids. They don't use them, but they participate with our children. But the other ones, Uncommon Friends, really doesn't have anything to do with the education. It's just and were a couple other ones that we've already taken off of here because they were not part of the education, the teachers, the students. So I just wanted to, and I know he asked me to share that, so I'm sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to learning. Nope. FSBA Board of Directors, it's a 2-year term. Ms. Excuse me.
It's done.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Learning for Life. Ms. Giovanelli served on that one for the last 2.
Yeah, I've been on it for a while.
Go ahead.
But that's what I was saying. So those,
Yeah.
those two, the bottom 2 are really not school related. It's not really school
Okay.
related as the other ones are. So, I mean, they've been on here as well as many others that have been, over the years, have diminished or went away.
Okay.
Because we do that because we do that. Even though they call us to go, we need you to be our judges, or we need you to do this, it really doesn't have a role in the district.
But Uncommon Friends does actually, because they have a scholarship program. If they're not involved with the schools, they can't do this, they don't get the scholarship. They give money out, but they get money. And I think that's why the relationship was my understanding.
And they haven't done that. The only thing they've been working on for the last 2 years is the house, the property. So scholarships, we've not seen any scholarships come out of
They
there.
used to give out scholarships,
Yeah,
and we
they haven't been
actually, judged them.
Dr.
and
Savage,
everything.
can you go ahead and discuss these two? Do you want to talk about those two particular?
Yeah, absolutely, Vice Chair. I'm happy to do that. So as, so one of the things you noted, and I think Ms. Jordan tried to speak on this a little bit too, is just in the authority committee purpose section, what we've listed as some of these committees are required by law. Some of them are institutional seats based on various different configurations. Some cases, as Ms. Giovanelli was saying, entities in order to try to serve their purpose. They're nonprofits. They may be written into their bylaws that they will have a standing member of the the school board for Lee County as an institutional member without reviewing each of their individual bylaws to know it. And a lot of times we rely upon our board members who serve in these capacities to continue to engage with us. So as she mentioned, there are a number of ones you can't see because they've been eliminated. They are either committees that no longer meet, they're ones that allow either a staff person to now meet in instead, or they just no longer meet. And so it really depends. There's kind of an ebb and flow with this. And so what I would say to the board is, if there's a board member interest in serving in that liaison capacity, one of the first orders of business is to engage and kind of introduce and say, do they still want to have that institutional seat? If there is no real interest, or if they'd rather us as staff reach out to these entities and say, we on behalf of the board would like to just kind of engage a little bit with you and get some clarification on maybe what's your recent work. Are you still doing student scholarships? We'd be happy to bring that information back to you all in your one-on-ones so that the board can make an informed choice of whether you'd like to take the time today to appoint someone or whether you'd rather delay and get a little more information on these two particular entities, because we have filled all the rest of these institutional seats, but those are two that we'd be happy to research unless board members are so inclined to want to carry that water for us. It's totally up to the board.
I'm in favor of postponing and reaching out, staff reaching out. Ms. Giovanelli and Ms. Jordan both made great points about it, but maybe we need to get some more information to see if they're really looking for a board member or perhaps a staff member to engage.
Sounds great. We're happy to do that.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
And I'd like to add to that, so I also do STEMtastics through the Edison Festival of Light, as well as the Edison Fairs, which is the science fair, and that's actually involved with many of our teachers and staff at our school district. And I would like to add, that's kind of would fall under one of these as well. And I do participate as much as I can on the Edison Fairs because they do it by Zoom now. But I can't always attend. Somehow there's a conflict sometimes. So like DAC actually. So if you could reach out to Gary Nelson and I can give you that, but I think it would behoove us as well to have someone involved in that, because they are always looking for judges every year, and I judge when I can. Last year was a conflict with the parade was of the same day as the judging. So, but that would allow maybe someone else to run out there that morning and do the judging, because it's usually till like early morning to noon. So, if I would like to add that, because I find it important, and that whole Edison Fairs. I may be wrong, maybe the others don't want to be involved, but I just wanted to add that and put that out there as well.
Ms. Jordan?
Thank you. And I mentioned that to you this morning. I mentioned that this morning because I was trying to go over all of these in my head, what is out there. But you have been such a great person where every time there is a need of judges or as a community member and involved in that, you have always shared all that with us as a board to get us excited to be a part of that. So I don't know if that's something that should be on here, or if you continue to do that, it works.
So I'm happy to provide a little more clarification again. So the goal of this activity, right, is to address for where there are institutional seats, where there are defined memberships, it's really about the relationship with the entity. So in our case, you all as individual members of the board, if you are relating to another entity in a formalized manner, in the case of something like, serving on a governing board, as is the example it's listed in the Uncommon Friends, it's a part of that governing board. What's different and distinct from that I'm hearing a little bit, is sometimes you as members of the community, as members of our board, are often invited to participate in various different functions, such as serving as a judge, serving as a relationship in that piece. If it isn't a defined entity that has a need, it may not necessarily fit into this activity where we would, on an annual basis, appoint a member as a formal liaison. That means there could be other relationships that don't necessarily mean here. I'm not saying that is or isn't, but we could be happy to do that additional research, much in the same way we'd be doing it for Learning for Life and Uncommon Friends, to kind of get an update with that. I'd be more than happy to reach out to, from Edison Fairs as well as STEM, clarify what the nature of a relationship is, clarify for the board what the nature of the ask is in terms of your service in that liaison capacity, so that, again, you'd be making an informed choice. Certainly bring that information back to one-on-ones, and then if you want to have more follow-up board conversation, certainly in the direction of Superintendent, I'll be happy to follow on that as well.
Dr. Savage, I appreciate that. That was sort of what was in my mind, because I know I serve on numerous boards here in the community, but it's not as superintendent of schools. It's just by virtue of things that I've done or been affiliated with in the past. So I appreciate the research on that, and we will come back to the board and advise you. Thank you.
Information on that starting in our one-on-ones. Okay. And we do have a new institutional request liaison seat, and I do know that Mr. Ribble is the one who would like to serve on this, if I am correct. Is that right? Okay. Is that okay? Everybody good with that? Yeah, it's just getting added as an institutional request. Yep.
I'll be an alternate.
Dr. Savage, do you have everything you need?
I have everything I need. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. We are able to now move on to public comment. Attorney DuPay-Bruno, can you please address public comment?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. There is no one signed up for public comment.
Okay. Next up is good of the order. I know that a few of you are going to hold your comments for this evening with this long meeting we've had, but if I will go down the row anyway, just in case anybody would like to mention anything. I'll start with Ms. Shaviano. Do you have anything for good of the order?
No, I do not.
Mr. Persons?
Not at this time.
Ms. Jordan?
Not at this time, thank you.
Mr. Ribble?
Not at this time.
Mrs. Giovanelli?
Not at this time.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes, sorry. Always has to be me, so. Just real quick updates. Auditor position is currently, I asked that it remain open based on our discussion last time. I've had a brief discussion with Chief Montemurano, and I'm going to kind of catch up with her, and I will send out some messages in regards to where we're at with that process. So I wanted to give you that update. So second thing is I did have some further discussions with Dr. Shaker as well as Dr. Duncan in regards to students involved in meetings. I had mentioned this, we kind of went back, some of you, probably about a year ago, I'd asked about this, kind of shifting from a model of passive to active, and part of that I've kind of asked for to see what a model would look like if we had either a workshop or an action meeting, not quite sure where it would be at, probably a workshop would be my guess, but have either a student or multiple students present something to us from that model. So as things come down, make sure that the administration will keep you informed of that and anything else. So last thing, just a quick foundation report, since this is the time we usually give that. Dr. Carlin and I attended the foundation. They're going through their strategic plan, finalizing that process, and that will come out I believe in our January meeting, so that will be kind of a big update of how they do things at the foundation. And also as Relay, they had a record number of Golden Apple applicants, people that actually fulfilled and went through it too, so that was amazing. So awesome. That is all I have until tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll save mine for this evening as well, but I do want to say thank you to all of the whole staff today did such a great job on the workshops and moving through it slowly. So I truly appreciate, and I know that the board does too, moving through that very clearly and understandably. Ms. Attorney Dupuy-Bruno, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So in December, legal met with the attorney for the city of Bonita Springs with regards to Bonita Springs Elementary. There does seem to be some confusion with regards to certain facts. The recommendation from both councils is that we have one liaison from each board meet with council so we can have a discussion probably with the superintendent or her designee as well as the city manager. So I would ask that the board designate one individual to serve as the liaison for the board so we can move forward with this meeting so we can resolve the issue with Bonita Springs Elementary.
Is there any board member who would like to serve on this committee? Go ahead, Ms. Jordan.
Just a question. What is the, what would the board liaison be doing? Just there to listen to what is, because of course they would need to come back to us to have that conversation on what we are wanting.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure what that looks like.
Yes.
I saw Mr. Ribble raise his hand. Is that something you'd like to serve on?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Carlin?
Thank you very much. I have no comments. I'll reserve those for this evening as well, but just thank you for your attention, thank you for your enthusiasm, and thank you for trusting our staff to bring forward high-quality recommendations. We are pushing the envelope, we know, but we're doing it on behalf of student learning and school safety, and just appreciate your attention today, so thank you.
Today we have our regular action meeting starting at 6 p.m. At this point, seeing that there is no other business to come before this body and no objection, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 4:29 p.m.